Okay, we'll call item D1, environmental resolution / ordinance. We have about 45 minutes for this topic. Does that seem like it should be enough? Hopefully. Probably not. Okay, well, let's start with that. Hopefully that we can cover that. Ms. Ash, how are we doing on streaming?
Well, it looks like it's working, but I'm gonna have to go online and make sure.
Okay. And recording, we are still recording, so
Yes,
we
we
should
are
be fine.
recording.
Hopefully the streaming is working. And, great, so you had in your packet a number of different things. One, there was a draft climate change ordinance, there's a draft tree planting resolution, there's a draft annual tree planting program, and, some tree planting work group meeting notes. So, I do wanna thank you. Let's go ahead and do some introductions.
Samantha Bailey, Environmental Planner for Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments.
And I wanna just thank Samantha and PPACG, Andy Gunning, who is her boss, has just embraced her helping us, and we're very grateful for the help, so appreciate that. Karen, I think people know you.
Karen Birchfield, Senior Planner, Management Service.
Great, thank you. Melody?
Melody Doherty, Management Springs Pond Project.
Great. So, I think what I'd like to suggest is, so you all have seen this document. It's now, phrased as an ordinance as opposed to a resolution. It could go back and forth, could go back to be a resolution. I did get some input from, Jeff Parker, who suggested we could do it this way, or we could do it the other way. It really didn't have a lot of impact, I think, on it. The advantage of doing it in ordinance is it would be, take 2 readings. And as we've discussed before, I think we envisioned doing the first reading at some point in September, going out to the community, getting it, having some awareness, some input and so forth for 2 or 3 months, and then coming back towards the end of the year and adopting it more fully, as opposed to in 1 reading, here it is, because we really haven't rolled this out to the community. You all have seen this, but what I'd like to do is give Karen, Samantha, Melody a chance to go through and just explain the changes perhaps, why it's organized the way it is, and maybe just run through the resolution itself or the ordinance itself, and we can address council questions from there.
Okay, well, I can start with a little bit of general background. I think this really came about for members of the Sustainable Environment Work Group. There's several members that are very strong expertise in emissions and climate change, and so they worked with the mayor and Councilmember Elder, embraced the effort. And as we know, the city has a strong interest in environmental preservation and climate change. We've done several inventories in the past, greenhouse gas inventories, and just prepared an updated one in 2017. So I think this is sort of an effort to cull some of the priority projects. Some are directly emissions related, others looking at kind of secondary impacts of climate change. Most of them are consistent with Plan Manitou in one way or another. Maybe they will fulfill policy. 3 or 4 of them would result in priority actions that are in Plan Manitou, but all are consistent. And there are some targets defined for some key actions that contribute to emissions, and one is energy from buildings, and the other is, emissions from buildings, and the other is emissions from gasoline-powered transportation. So those, they're percentages. It's fairly ambitious, but those are the percentages that climate change scientists say we need to achieve. In those efforts, a lot of the activity that will help to address those may be outside our control. Could have to do with CSU's energy mix, but we'll kind of look at all of the contributing factors as we move along. We might want to work at a regional level to address some of those other things. So I think this is really about bringing together resources and capacity, which is always a challenge with really multidisciplinary efforts. In terms of just specific actions, 3, 6, 9, and 11 all would accomplish Plan Manitou priority actions, short-term actions that we've said are important that we want to do in the next few years. I guess, yeah, that's probably my overview. I think, yeah, as you mentioned, Mayor, Samantha brings another perspective for us to kind of help us broaden our capacity a bit. If you wanna
Some of these efforts are being established region-wide, so I thought it was a great idea to be a part of this. So, for example, establishing a creek wash program, there are a few committees down in Fountain that have this program already established, so instead of duplicating effort and kind of reducing the capacity and workload to establish these programs, we can definitely duplicate some of these efforts. So, like I mentioned, it reduces the workload and capacity for the employees here at Manitou Springs. And I would love to see some of the measures that aren't established yet to be region-wide. So I really hope to bring this to the board at some point once this resolution passes and gets implemented.
Great. Again, thank you for your help. Before we go on, let me just acknowledge Corinne Toll, who has been chairing the Environmental Sustainability Work Group for the past year and a half. Thank you for all of your efforts. So appreciate that. Melanie?
I would like to say that all the initiatives actually really impact our climate and the health of pollinators. I'm sure you've all heard that there's a massive decline and there's concern about the extinction of pollinators. So all the resolutions turned into an ordinance would really just enhance their survival rates. Our mission is to create a national environment. I believe we can do that not only here in our little town, but regionally, statewide. For that to go more national would be wonderful. So I really see that everything on here will help the Manitou Springs Pollinator Project initiative and just help increase and support or rebuild our pollinator population. We are responsible for that. So I really like what we're creating here and where our initiatives are going to go.
Great. Before I forget, is Allie here? Yes, she will. Oh, Allie, I'm sorry. You want to come on up and join us as well? Allie has been part of the tree planting aspect, and we'll get into that in just a minute here. Sorry I missed you. Does that everybody know Allie McAlexander? Who is our arborist on staff. I think everybody on council has met me before. So
Yeah.
thank you for joining us as well. Melody, anything else?
No, that was it. Thank you very much.
Allie, did you want to add anything on the resolution, on the ordinance in terms of the big picture, the environmental?
I don't think so. I
Okay.
think that everyone kind of already touched on everything, but yeah. Thanks.
Council, questions, comments? On the right track, things we should change in terms of the approach?
I don't think it should be an ordinance,
Okay. It should be
a resolution.
okay. And would you see adopting that resolution just in one reading and saying this is it and we're done, or do you see rolling it out in some other way?
Depends what you want. You can go either way.
Okay, what would you like?
Doesn't matter.
Okay, anybody else?
The reason why is that there are a whole bunch of dates in here, and most of them are gonna happen in like a year. And then it's a dead ordinance. It just doesn't seem like the right way to do it.
When you say a dead ordinance, I'm not sure I understand. The dates that I see go out to 2030, so it's hopefully a living document.
Or any of them go to 2030. All of them are in the next 2 years.
Okay. Okay.
And so that's why I just don't think that's the right mechanism to do it.
How about let's address that issue in terms of let's weigh in on the technical aspects, because we can bring it back to be a resolution pretty quickly. Anybody else have any strong feelings or want to weigh in on either a resolution or an ordinance?
I would basically go with the resolution, just because it's where it's at, and you're not gonna be bound to this one as an ordinance and one of the changes, you can do it, change the resolution. And then also, my other part on this is, if we're gonna do this, we seem to, granted, move things out slowly or whatever, but everything seems to be in place, and to me, it'd be like, let's do this, let's get it going, let's move forward, do that. And then, cause that's what we need to do, because we've got a lot of things we got to work on, and if we move things down the road, keep moving down the road, they never seem to get that completed, so, my opinion would be make a resolution and just adopt it.
Okay.
I would agree, I think the resolution is the proper way to go at this point in time. In the future, there may be, as this, project evolves, there may be, an appropriate place for an ordinance, but right now, I think it's much more important to get the resolution in plan, which is really more of an action plan at this point, and, make sure that we budget properly for it.
Okay, anybody else?
Along the concept of, it's got a number of goals and near-term goals, we talked about at one point having a quarterly review of these activities, so by going to a resolution, I think we could then set it up to specify quarterly reviews through the year 2020. And then at that point, the then current council can renew it, expand it, and so forth. Hence the living document point you were on, Ken.
The document,
Without going through the ordinance process.
the document has the quarterly review in it, right? Okay. Anybody else? Yes, you're smiling. Do you wanna weigh in on it?
I think my ears are still stinging from you guys telling me that a resolution was basically meaningless when I rolled this out. I don't care how it goes, I just know that Manitou needs to do these things. And if Manitou does this, the broader community can see us doing it. It's easier for us to do things because we're a small community, we're home rule. We can start rolling these things out, that the scientists have told us, we need to take this seriously, because things are changing that I see every day. So I don't really care if it's an ordinance or it's a meaningless resolution. I just wanna see Manitou start stepping up to what the scientists have told us we must do. I have grandkids. You guys probably have grandkids or children too. And, you know, that's what it's about. We're all dead as far as the climate goes, but the little people are gonna be here for a long time, and we're either gonna set them up with something that they can work with and move forward with, maybe with butterflies, or not. So that's my thinking. I don't really care how it looks, we just need to do this.
Alright, so if I'm hearing correctly, I think the majority would like a resolution. Consider it, adopt it, move forward. I'm sorry, so you need to weigh in, but I think I heard the majority, so.
You too, and that's fine. I agree with Nancy's budget comment and Bob's quarterly review and the resolution on quarterly amounts.
Okay. When would you like to, well, I'll ask this, but then back up to change this. When would you like to see this come before you? You would like to see it
Next week?
a year ago.
Yeah.
But
But next week?
probably not gonna quite get it on the agenda next week, but soon is what I'm hearing.
I'm just answering the question.
Alright. Anybody else have any, particular, sooner is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you mentioned that you want to roll this out. You wanted to do something after a first reading, in between a first and a second reading of like 6 weeks.
Right.
Do you still want to do whatever it is that was?
I think so. I think it's still, what it was bring the community together, get their input on this topic and suggestions, and have a community forum about this issue.
And if you want to do that before we pass a resolution, seems like you want the resolution to incorporate whatever it is that comes out of this greater community meeting,
I think we could. We certainly could.
which would include probably coming before us next week or in 3 weeks.
I think it would, it might. So that would be one strategy, would be to hold some sort of a community forum before we do this. The second would be to say, we've done it, now, and let's have a forum to tell you what we've got in here. As Karen mentioned, a lot of it isn't new, a lot of it is in Plan Manitou. It's more of an action of when we're gonna do it, and not a lot of specific, but kind of the order of it and so forth. So people shouldn't be terribly surprised, but potentially they may wanna weigh in, so I'm certainly fine with either way. I'm fine with passing it and then rolling it out and saying, this is what we've done, and I'm fine with waiting a little bit, which is a little bit more risky, that it gets put off, and having a community forum, which we don't have set up at this point, so that would delay it a little bit, and I don't have any strong feelings one way or the other. I think the key is either way we should get out to the community, either pass it and then get it out, or, you know, tell the community this is what we're doing and then pass it. I don't have any strong feelings one way or the other.
I would recommend passing it sooner rather than later, having the community meeting to further flesh out some of these things
Okay,
into action plans and budgets.
okay. We can certainly do that and say, hey, here's 14 topics. How would you like to help? And how would you like to bring your talents to it? So that certainly would work. Anybody else wanna weigh in on the concept of how to engage the community, pass it sooner than later, then go out to the community?
Well, I think what we're gonna be telling the community is we've got a work group that's worked on this, council appointed work group, worked on it, they bring a resolution to us and we look at it and we've either got to, I think the community's going to support because they've known about this group and they're gonna support us more if we just move forward with responses and, you know, let's get this going as a resolution, we move forward, get it going, and then if they have questions, they can talk to the work group and talk to us.
Okay.
That's what I feel.
Great. Anybody else wanna weigh in on the scheduling of this?
Regarding the scheduling, we're gonna have a number of community things coming up. The election's obviously the prime event, but we also have other topics we're talking about tonight involving community engagement. So I think we've got a limited period of time, a limited number of events. As this working group formed and deliberated, I know I had an opportunity to go and participate in one of the evenings. Other people in the community have the same option. The thought I have is if there was a way to further energize that working group or committee, that would be really good in terms of announcing this and giving credit to the group that did that, and then very much an open invitation of Corinne and her group agreed with that, and it's gonna be a sustainable group, to ask other members of the community to join that group. Corinne, what are the future plans for this group meeting?
For the
Sustainability.
the sustainability, the Sustainable Energy Work Group really has, kind of disbanded. We get together, on an ad-need basis, because we found that, you know, the same 4 or 5 people were showing up at every meeting. So, you know, I certainly, we can support this resolution. I can convene a meeting and see if, in fact, I get some people to show up for it.
I think just to clarify a little bit, so it has been morphed into the discussion about this resolution.
Yes.
And there has been the same people getting together under that umbrella to focus on the resolution.
Right.
And that's what's happened in the last month, 2 months or so.
Right.
And I think then this group that's been getting together on this resolution can still get together and figure out, okay, what's next? I think they've been very focused on putting this together, which has taken a great deal of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the issue is, okay, as Bob mentioned, how to energize the group, figure out where people want to spend their time and so forth.
Yes.
So it will continue to be under that work group, perhaps with a slightly different focus.
Okay, if you say so.
Okay? I think that would be as opposed to starting a new structure.
Yeah.
We had that structure.
Yeah, you do have that
So we may as well use that. I think
That's
is what
right.
the group talked about.
And see if we can get some champions for some of these.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in terms of, I've heard a couple of you, I don't think I've heard a majority yet, pass now, roll it out to the community. I've heard from a number of people. Councilman Holbrook, do you want to weigh in on the timing of that?
I think we need to pass it now and then work through it.
Okay.
We'll wait.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
I just had a comment, especially on the public forum, you know, Laura Montgomery used to hold the Mecca, events in City Hall, and maybe let Green Cities or one of the other groups, the pollinators, call an environmental gathering, invite the city, the whole community to come and then, have it, I could see having a whiteboard with each one of these different, aspects to it, just for, brainstorming and such, and just, give people a chance. I think the community likes to have a chance to weigh in, and so, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but that would take it out of the city and let somebody else do it. Conrad, his name's in here somewhere, I can ask him if the Green Cities would tackle that.
That'd be great. I
Or
think so.
maybe Melody talk to Beth, and maybe it could be a collaborative.
That'd be
something.
wonderful, because I think that this resolution, there are so many overwhelming topics, and I think to just pace it out like that, when you have the action, I love the budget idea, and for people to just, start incorporating these new realities in a way where, okay, I can walk away, breathe, and then come back, and where am I gonna champion and serve? I think will just be a better way of coming together with the residents and businesses and what we're doing here.
What do you think, Nancy? You reacted to that? You've been to those. I always thought they were great.
Of course.
I haven't.
You haven't been any? Okay, cause every little itty bitty green group and big ones too would come and have a table. So it was a really nice harvest of information just from all the green hearts. So I will
Okay.
ask, and you
Great,
ask Beth.
I'll ask Beth, and
And
I
we
know
can take it
I
to the
represent
garden
the pollinator project, so we'll just go ahead with this
Okay.
and do it.
Anybody else? Jay, you haven't weighed in on the timing of it. Any thoughts in particular?
Doesn't matter to me, you wanted to have this meeting, so I thought I'd bring that up. That
Okay.
doesn't matter to me.
All right, so it sounds like, what I'm hearing is redraft it as a resolution. That's easy. Put it on the agenda as soon as we can. I don't know exactly what, but we've been struggling with the time of our agendas, and we'll try to keep that, commitment to keep the agendas as short as we can, but we will get it on the agenda. And it sounds like we then, we'll see if we can get some help in trying to put together some sort of a community forum.
Yes.
Let's focus on the specifics of the resolution, itself, in terms of any suggested changes, any comments, because the next time you will see it, it will be on our agenda to adopt. Of course, it could be changed at that point as well, but it'd be great to get any thoughts about the specific first 14 items. I'm assuming no one has any concerns about 15 and 16, which are monitor and report on progress on a quarterly basis, and then utilize the service of project coordinator staff or other expertise to implement that. So there are 14 particular items there, and they're drafted in chronological order.
The only thing I would, maybe, enhance is number 9, Creek Watch program. It specifically addresses habitat and wildlife, but I would say that, human life in this case is important too. As I mentioned a couple weeks ago, E. coli is, really bad in our area. And we would definitely have to work regionally on that because it's probably not managed and it's a big problem. But we are the direct recipients of the negative impact. So that maybe just expand that.
And do you have a suggestion of what that would look like?
I don't, other than that I know that from the creek walk and from Soda Springs Park, we see kids playing in the creek all the time. So it concerns me if we've got high level E. coli and kids and others are in the creek for their health.
So we add, if we had habitat, humans, I'm not sure that's the right word in
Yeah,
there.
it's probably not the best word.
And wildlife. Okay, so I think that captures the sentiment, that may not be the right term. Okay, any other changes or specifics that you'd like to go through?
I brought this up before, number 7. I don't understand why there's not a corresponding one for the average person who lives here.
Okay,
I don't understand why our utilities that we control don't have any sort of program. It's none that I've ever heard of. Maybe there is.
so would you suggest that that be expanded, we use the same language, but to expand it to include, if it's a green, it would be business and city program to assist citizens and local businesses? Does that capture it?
Essentially it does, then if you wanna break it out,
Or a separate one?
I mean,
But it's, you're talking about the same aspects of water conservation, energy efficiency, and so forth.
yeah, I would bet that our citizens use more of all that than our businesses. We just don't have a big, very large business district even with our hotels.
Okay. So either in that or as a separate.
Yeah, and CSU has all kinds of efficiency programs where they give you rebates. And you have like nothing.
Okay, great. Good comment. Anything else? Okay, let's, so this will be back,
I think that's something else. 14,
okay?
how is that gonna be measured? Is that a topic for another day?
Samantha, Karen, do you wanna weigh in on 14, the percentage of trips taken by green transportation methods, walking, biking, public transit, to 40%, increase the percentage to 40% by the end of 2030 by prioritizing complete streets, local workforce, and accessible housing, pedestrian and cyclist safety, and connectivity in all transportation and road projects. So the question is how we're going to measure that, how we're gonna know when we get to 40%. I think right now we are at 8%, if I remember that correctly. Someone has studied, and I believe that the number at the moment is 8% commute using alternative modes of transportation. Is that what I heard correctly?
That might be high, but you could get that from decennial census data,
Okay,
so we can continue to track that. We can track our, transit usage, easily. This is looking 20 years into the future, so I'm guessing we're gonna have some other technology for counting, even bikes and pedestrians by then. You could do, a daily, bike count.
You don't want to do this every year to know where you're at and it's only 10 years out. But if there's already a method that has been used to count our baseline, and as long as we have one, it's fine. I just didn't realize we've already had one.
apparently we do.
I mean, I think the issue is how you put all these numbers together to get an accurate number, and that's something to work on.
I wonder if the errors are the same constantly, that works.
I think what we wouldn't be able to, that measurement doesn't necessarily say what's causing that change. We just know people are using alternative transportation, it may or may not be due to accessible housing or cyclist safety and so forth, if I understand correctly. But they're not relating a particular strategy to a change, it's just measuring that aspect. Is that right?
I'm not sure about
Okay.
that, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So, Councilman Moore, I don't know if that exactly answered your question, but there's a little
Somewhat.
information, yeah.
So 13, I brought this up before, how can we, especially if Councilman Todd could weigh in, how can we affect any change to building standards when we do regional building? We just had an opportunity, that one comes around every 5 years?
Every
3 years.
3 to 4,
3 to 4.
and we did have,
And I
we did-
pushed to try to get it changed last time, and then we wanted to go along with it.
we did affect it last time. We got a number of adjustments, on basically the second reading, the second pass of the building code. So we supported, forget the name of the gentleman from Monument, Jim Rieger, and the Housing Advisory Board supported him, and they had a debate in the, open session of Pikes Peak Regional Building, and they put in changes. There probably were 5 that were put
Pretty
in.
watered down at the end of the day.
But it was improved. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So that's how we do it, to answer your question.
I know, but we, as a city, except for your representation, did, as far as I'm aware, did not have any direct representation while it was being hammered out, except as a general citizen scenario. And we didn't see it until it came before council to pass. In other words, so late in the process, we couldn't do anything, we couldn't have a committee to espouse our own ideas on how it could have been changed. Because housing's huge on energy usage.
so you're just suggesting that this municipality being more, be involved earlier in the process, although the way the process works is the code is drafted and circulated for comment, as you said, by the general populace, by contractors, by, the Housing Advisory Board of the region, et cetera. They all get to contribute at that juncture, and then we as a municipality, through our Housing Advisory Board, supported Jim Rager as a spokesperson to cause change at that time. That's how we did it.
So all I'm saying is 13, I don't see how we can do, I think it should be changed to be the things that we can do, which is make sure we insert ourselves in the process with a specific group as soon as it's possible.
So that would perhaps at the moment say, encourage and advocate for,
Sure. I'm just-
as opposed to since we're not adopting.
Yeah, there's not anything that we can directly do except be in that process as early as possible.
Okay,
Maybe Jim Riggins will come back to help us.
good comment.
I had that same concern, and a while ago, Becky asked for champions to step up to take on some of these projects, and Aaliyah German said that she would happily take on energy efficiency in homes. And I mentioned to her the fact that how do we balance that with regional building? And she said, she works for Davis Energy out in California. She works from home here in Manatee Springs. And what she does is energy efficiency in homes. She said that the measures that she will be recommending won't require regional building inspection. So I can't tell you what they are, but she's pretty competent, and if she says that, I trust it, and we could get some more information from her about that.
Great, thank you, Ms. Johnson.
So I'm just gonna go on a limb here and say that, there's nothing that says that we would have to continue to, use regional building inspection services into the future.
Yes, thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ryder?
I appreciate Councilman Rohr's ability to drill down into the operative aspects. I'll just make a mention of an example that I'm familiar with in my former, at the county level. We had a situation where we were not able to implement changes, which was resolved ultimately by establishing an experimental section in the code. And if we can advocate as a city for regional building experimental code section relating to the support for environmental sustainability issues, then we might be able to create that ladder rung that Jay is talking about that we will ultimately need.
Thank you. Let's change topics here and look to the resolution in terms of the second item on it, is establishing a tree protection program consistent with city wildfire mitigation policies and standards to educate and rebuild the town's forest and urban tree canopy with a goal of zero net tree loss beginning immediately and a net annual gain of tree cover beginning in 2020. So what you have also in front of you is a resolution which would be adopting an annual tree planting program starting actually this year potentially, with the planting of 147 trees to celebrate our 147th birthday. It does go through a number of the reasons of why we would want to do that, and basically suggests we should move forward and take a leadership role to make a difference. And then you also have just kind of a why, when, where, who, what, and so forth about the tree planting program. Would love to get some feedback from council. Are we on the right track of this? Or not?
We're gonna gain 147 trees every year going forward.
No, next year would be 148 trees, and the year after 149 trees. At a minimum, you certainly could gain more than that, but that would be a good start.
Alright, where are they going?
Good question. Ally?
Becky.
Oh, Becky, sorry.
Well, we met this afternoon, Melody and Ally and Mary Ellen. And that was one of the things we did, is like, where are these trees going? We started just with the 147, not thinking about the families or any of that other aspect program. So we talked about, the parks, certain parks where we could put them, and certain parks that we probably wouldn't put them. We talked about getting trees on Canyon Avenue where the trees were removed and actually putting trees into the parking lot. We talked about 60 trees, we're just kind of throwing a number out there for the school district. And hopefully they would take those on, and we figure those are mostly coniferous trees, pine trees, spruce, Douglas, whatever. And then rebuilding, we have 6 miles of creek side, because we have 3 miles of creek. So it's not all available for tree planting, but Samantha, I don't know if you know, but the little ribbon of corridor that follows our creek is thinned out tremendously in the last 10 years. Used to not be able to see through it, and now you see through it so many places, and there's big holes in the canopy, so a lot of them could go there. You have all my notes, girlfriend, so I know we talked, you take it for a second, or Melanie, because I don't have my notes, and we did talk about, trying to place them everywhere, as long as we can acquire them in the fall.
So essentially, we were wanting to start with the schools, so trying to, kind of get the educational side of this as well. So working with the school districts, for sure, high school, middle school, we'll see how the elementary school can try to pan out as well. And then as to your question about where are we gonna plant these, so we're planting smaller trees, so keep that in mind too. We're not planting, the $500 trees that you would wanna plant in your backyard. We're gonna be doing mostly bare root seedlings if we can get them. That's kind of a hard time in the year right now to purchase some of those types of trees. But we're trying to find smaller ones. So again, trying to keep the costs minimal by choosing smaller trees. So we'll be able to plant them in more locations just because they are a little bit smaller. And just something to think about is, we have a very old population of trees here. So we also need to start thinking about, planting these younger generations, because those trees aren't unfortunately going to last forever. So we need to think about incorporating this understory that will be able to replace some of these trees in the future. So even if we don't necessarily have, the exact places that we, can evenly place trees, we're also trying to replace for future loss. So incorporating kind of more understory trees that will help with that replacement in, 10, 30 years from now.
Yes.
I have a suggestion. I sort of came in late, but in Tulsa, Oklahoma, they had an issue where a lot of construction and they needed to plant trees. And as far as cost, what they did is they went out to the public, which is sort of like what you do for stars, name a star after someone. So they actually had people buy the tree in memory of, and it wasn't tacky, it was like something small. And these families basically bought the tree, and they bought their own little plaque, and which made them feel good. And they planted trees everywhere, and it didn't cost the city anything. They just gave a spot, and it'd sort of be like the star situation, but it was actually beautiful, and they had trees, and it was very tactful.
And
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Arab certainly has that program in place for the parks that could be used to expand to the rest of the city.
That'd be great. We only have 5 minutes on the topic left. Let me bring it back to council. And if you could just.
Doesn't the Forest Service give away seedlings?
They don't give them away. You can buy them from the state Forest Service.
Yes.
And we've been in touch with them. And they don't give them for free, but it's pretty inexpensive.
One of the things that we also talked about is the maintenance of these trees. Like the conifers up at school, if they can get established, which is usually at 3 years, if it hasn't died in 3 years, it's probably gonna survive. And, but we need to secure that. We can't just go out and plant these trees and then walk away. So there has to be some kind of another meeting and a meeting with council who, how is that gonna happen? Who is taking care of what?
Right.
But, I thought we had a pretty good meeting. We need more places though.
I'd like to add that the Manitou Springs Pollinator Project, we're joining forces with Allie, our city arborist, and Mary Ellen Montgomery, our city gardener, we have a Siberian elbow overpopulation issue, and because we have an organic land management policy, we're stepping forward. We have a lot of volunteers coming forward. We have a date set, September 14th in the morning, that we're gonna come out and use those methods and thin out our Siberian elm population, and that was one of the topics we brought to the table today, was areas where we might be able to put some of these trees in also to, so it's not all Siberian elm. And create that biodiversity, that canopy that we're looking for, and that's gonna be an ongoing project that Pollinator Project is gonna sponsor, so that was another alternative solution.
So, council, are you ready to consider this at the same time that we pass the resolution? Would you like to consider the environmental resolution at the same time as an action step to implement one aspect of this resolution?
Well, I certainly would, but like Nancy said, we need to do it soon, and we need to fund it.
Yep.
And,
Presumably it will come out of the $20,000 that we funded for the project, for the environmental work, so I think we have funded it. We just haven't allocated it, right. Any objection to putting this on at the same time that we consider the environmental resolution? Everybody okay with that? Yes? Okay? Yes?
Yeah, so how's it gonna change the look of the city from 147 years ago?
I'm sorry, how is it gonna change the look of the city in 147 years?
From 147 years ago.
That's a good question. I don't know how many trees we had 147 years ago. I do know that Palmer planted many, many, many trees. So his effort when he established the city, one of his key efforts was plant trees. I don't know what happened or where that was, but I suspect a lot of our historical trees were planted at that point. So our kids, 147 years from now, will look back and say, thank goodness they did this.
Yeah.
Everybody, so I think I heard consensus. Susan, are you okay with the timing of that? Okay. Everybody okay with the timing? Great. Any specifics that you'd like to see changed in the last minute or so that we have in terms of the resolution itself?
Just in terms of practicality, trade-off, and I don't think it will be a trade-off, but I don't know all the science on it, between watering the trees and, preserving moisture in the ground. And, you know, Ally explained the, life cycle of trees, which I do think is an important component. So there's just a lot of, planning yet to be incorporated into this, but I think you're at a good start, and it's a low-hanging fruit sort of thing, so I think it's good to get going with this.
There is, and we are very fortunate that we have someone on staff. I think if we did not, it would be a lot more challenging, although Becky and Melody certainly could help to pull it together. Having someone on staff
well,
is
we
pretty
could
good.
address that. We
Yeah.
talked about
Yes.
trees that have the ability to
Absolutely.
be watered and trees that are
Okay.
off water. There's different species
Right.
and different techniques, so we did talk about that. And,
And I would like to, we have Mary Ellen sitting very much, and she added quite a bit to that.
We have great expertise.
Yes, we do,
to bring
it's
to bear.
wonderful.
And I would also say that Dan Stewart, who I refer to as the man who
Yes.
plants trees,
Yes.
Dan has planted, I don't know,
he said-
20,000 trees,
yeah,
30,000 trees.
He said thousands.
For the last 40 years, in and around Manitou Springs, he's offered to help. And so I think he knows how physically to get it done and mobilize people to help. So I think we should be encouraged for that.
So will any of these trees, fulfill number 3 in what will be the resolution, which is develop a local food assessment and action plan to increase food security?
You know, it sure could. It's not this 147 trees, but we're working on planting a family,
10%.
so for residents, they could plant a tree guild. And a tree guild is like planting a little mini forest with all the support plants with it. And food is often part of that, whether it's a native planting without water or whether it's one that's cultivated like an apple tree with support plants around it. But you don't just plant a tree by itself out in the middle of somewhere. You plant a community, which is how trees grow in communities. They don't grow spaced out evenly along concrete walks. They don't, very rarely do they just pop up in the middle of nowhere, and they grow in a community with plants that are dynamic accumulators or nitrogen fixers or ground cover, and they all work together to increase the building of the soil. Trees are very integral in water for other plants. They have the ability to pump water like the other plants can't. You can pull water up and pull water in, so it all works together, so that could absolutely be
Great.
part of it.
Good
It should
question.
be. I mean, local food security is big.
And just integrate the Bear Smart Committee into this too, because obviously then we don't want to attract more bears.
Great, thank you. Good discussion. The item will be back on our agenda as soon as we can get it back. What I'm envisioning is that we will have sometime in October a tree planting day of sort in conjunction with the school district. It may be appropriate to see if we can wrap into that a forum as well, and a potluck or a celebration of the work that we've done. So thank you, everybody, for your efforts in putting that together. Very much appreciated. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna call, let's see. Yes. We'll take 5.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
2 minutes.
When UPass has a community garden with trees. They just do that track, which is part of Manitou. And they plant trees and stuff out there, so they actually have a community garden that you should share.
Yeah, we'll talk later.
And trail mix it very and there's a lot of water there, so
You doing great.
I'm good. How are you doing?
I saw very well.
She's spending much time here, or is she
She's off to your part of the she's off to Portland, Maine.
Oh, she is?
Thursday.
I just heard of the
Your daughter has
that was taking on a huge.
she's doing this every 90 days in nurse rotation. So she's in Portland. She returned, she was like last year about this time.
Colorado Springs wants to pass it, she's 171.
Yeah, no, it's, no, she's
That seems a little bit ambitious to start off.
the highly qualified RN.
I'll set a minimum, we can plan more, that'd be great.
Basically the transition care plans for patients.
I try to raise my hand.
Specialists.
I don't want to
It's so great.
I was thinking too small.
Just move around.
Yeah,
Do it.
wow,
Yeah.
good for her.
Let's see, Corinne, thank you. Who else is up here for this?
I have other members, of course.
Whoever would like to come on up, feel free. We will get ready to roll.
Loading it up, all right. You know what? Consider friends. People don't, I think about collecting. How do I hold them accountable for making decisions? Because I can tell you that, or then they go to sit and I don't know, it's different, two different things, yeah. We will have a Zoom for someone. Yeah. It's been years since we did this. She told me things I didn't know.
I'm afraid to, I'm triple afraid of
I'm like, that's not true.
Whatever. Oh, I see. So that I never did later. Just about to check out. I have.
You have the contract?
You found it? That, perfect.
So you'll bring it in
Right now.
when we're ready. Well, not this second, but
Where are you in?
we are on the second item on the work session. On the housing authority.
Well,
Who else you got up here? You got what you need?
well, they're all up there.
I know that, but they're ready to come as soon as we're ready to go.
I think that's all tonight.
You good? All right.
You can talk to her.
But I know he's been active.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, no, he was practicing.
You're done?
Yeah.
Great. Right with your Leah was going to check on you. Okay, who are we missing? We're missing Bob and,
Thanks for your note back on the,
Huh?
thanks for your note back on the planning commission.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
so, anyway, there has to be a meeting tomorrow, which you may be there.
That's the metro.
Yeah.
That's not the normal meeting.
I know, it's an emergency meeting.
Okay. Well, yeah, where's that?
It's on the board. I just found out, and so Ralph and Golf are reached out to me asking me to together, so, yeah, so we're gonna get together Thursday, with at least one, and maybe one other one.
And tomorrow, you think they're meeting here?
Yeah.
At what time?
3 o'clock. I don't know about here, check the board, but it is 3 o'clock, and it goes tomorrow. No, window.
Oh, the window board, okay.
Okay, Karen, are you all set? Let's go ahead and get started. Oh, we're not quite started. Can we start without that?
Yeah, I have some introductory comments I'd like to make, and.
How about some introductions first?
That's it, I was gonna say that.
Thank you.
Yes, yes, go ahead and introduce yourself, these are board members
Okay.
of the Housing Advisory Board.
And if anybody doesn't know these gentlemen, I'd be surprised if you introduce yourself.
Andy Wells.
Thank you.
Dale Ladd.
Corinne Toll.
So you almost, you do, you maybe have a quorum. Thank you for being here. Appreciate that. So,
All right, so, if I may, I would, first of all, I wanna thank council for giving deep consideration to our HAP strategic plan. I'd like to start out by letting you know that we consider this a living document. So if you wanna add more life to this plan, go right ahead, we're up to it. Developing this plan has not been easy, considering the challenges our community faces around housing. Very little developable land, older buildings, many in sore need of upgrades, an aging community, small lot sizes, no dedicated funding, limited staff availability, and the disparity between housing costs and livable wages. This disparity has created increasing homelessness and also a highly competitive state and national grant environment, but that may be loosening up. We are encouraged by the will of our citizens who asked for housing in neighborhoods to be added as an element to our comprehensive plan for the purpose of increasing housing diversity and affordability. We're excited about being able to incorporate energy efficiency measures into our programs to comply with the sustainability focus of Plan Manager. And we remember the wisdom expressed by the Clarion staff in creating Plan Manager. They reminded us to always take advantage of opportunities that arise, whether the opportunity was or was not part of the plan. And that's, low-hanging fruit, you have to do that, so. Any questions about that? Okay, then Karen was kind enough to create a slideshow for us, so we'll go right into that. The background is the Plan Manager action, one of the actions that was required of us was to develop a short-term strategic plan to address Manitou Springs housing needs, and that's what you have been before you for consideration tonight. In May of 2018, HAB presented the draft plan to council in a work session. Some of you were there for that. And tonight we are seeking feedback before bringing the plan back to council at a formal meeting for approval. The Housing Advisory Board formed in 2017, and the plan has been a primary focus. From 2018 to 2019, in order to inform the plan, we conducted a community survey that was filled out by over 300 people in our community. We've updated the housing needs assessment just recently from the needs assessment that was done in conjunction with the formulation of Plan Manager. We have refined our action plan, and we've taken a few preliminary steps to implement some activity. So these are the guiding principles of our plan, and these really are taken right out of Plan Manager, as is our the ordinance that was created for the purpose of organizing the HAB itself. The vision: residents of all ages, abilities, and means have access to safe, affordable, and quality housing in a livable neighborhood. Our mission is to address all aspects of housing and neighborhoods, to define, research, facilitate, and promote safe, sustainable, resilient, and habitable housing for our community. And you've heard a lot of talk from us about affordable housing, but increasingly members of our board are more and more aware of the need for habitable housing. We keep getting reports of houses that look like they're about to fall apart, and we really are seeking to address that kind of habitability in our housing stock, without necessarily adopting the universal maintenance code, which I've already tried to bring to council, and council didn't want that, so we have some work to do on that. So the data, how the data is accumulated for plans such as this is essentially by census estimates. The government has websites that you can go to and to establish affordability targets for policy and implementation. And the gap analysis is composed of an analysis of what's called the area median income. What is considered affordable housing is housing that doesn't cost more than 30% of your family income. This is a formula that's really evolved in our country over many years and has become a pretty firm and workable formula for HUD. And basically the goal is that only 30% of an individual's earning goes toward housing needs, leaving the other 70% of their income for food, clothing, transportation, medicine, whatever other necessities there may be. So if you do end up spending more than 30% of your income on housing expenses, you are considered cost burden. And that's how the whole AMI formula works. And going again to the gap analysis, we identified if there, through the housing assessment study, if there is a deficit or surplus within each category for rental and owner housing. And the data highlights, you can see those that are circled in red indicate the deficits in rental housing, where the greatest need for residents is for those earning below 50% of area median income. The area median income for Manitou Springs, the most current, is $65,396 annually. That is somewhat less than El Paso County. Their area median income is $70,680.
What was the first number you gave us?
The first number, 65.
65,000.
Yeah, 65,396 is Manitou Springs area median income. And it's interesting that it's lower than El Paso County because largely our houses are more expensive when they're for sale. And so that creates a, even a bigger gap for those that wanna live here in our community. Okay, and then in terms of.
Could I ask you a question about that? So I struggle to understand the gap analysis. I think I understand it better now.
It takes a while.
But if I understand it correctly, so just using that chart, we are 71 units short.
That's right.
For folks earning $17,670 or less.
That's right.
We need 71 more units.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit confused by the needing 230 units for those people making more than 70,000.
Yeah, more than 80% of the area median income.
Right. Why is there a focus, or maybe there's not, maybe it's just a data point about that? That seems like obviously it's the largest gap there. Maybe you could talk just a moment so I can understand that better.
I think I asked that of our housing specialist, who assisted with this data. And he said, so that means we have a deficit of higher rentals, higher income rentals. And he said, well, the market can address that. It's just something our market hasn't addressed yet.
Higher income rentals.
Upper spectrum, yeah.
What the most recent housing need assessment discovered is that going back to 2014 with the needs assessment, there were more rental units available in Manitou Springs than there are now. What's happened with basically the housing boom in terms of prices, that people are, they're holding on to their homes, they're investing in their homes in order to cash out if they need to. And properties that were formerly rented are not rented anymore. They've been claimed by owners, which is just kind of taking them off the market. So that is part of it. And you've got to recognize that short-term rentals have an impact on housing availability in any community as well. So that's another factor.
So again, just to see if I understand this correctly. So the bulk of our housing is meeting the needs of folks below roughly around 47,000. If I add the first three, 133, 248, 326, up to the 47,000, that seems to be the bulk of our housing. So that's meeting the needs of those folks. Except for if we had 71 more, we could actually meet the needs and perhaps exceed the housing needs for the folks earning $47,120 and less. Is that how I should read this?
I'm not sure. Did you understand that?
So I think what this means is that we're doing pretty well at meeting most of the needs of our rental population, except for those making under 50% of area median income.
And those making more than 70.
Correct,
Okay,
yes.
I think I understand the
yes.
chart, so thank you, that's
Yeah.
what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
You had a question?
Yeah, cause I'm confused. First of all, I wanna state that I am completely supportive of doing what we can to have a very diverse, population within Manitou, and housing is a huge component of that. However, and so that to me is ultimately the goal, is to maintain an appropriately diverse, population that will help maintain our culture and our way of life in Manitou, which we all value, I believe. I'm confused as to how this necessarily connects to that, and it could be because I just didn't spend enough time, trying to absorb.
Well, they give us targets to aim for.
Okay, and that was kind of, my question is, do we have targets that we want in each of this? Because even the vision is so aspirational. So if someone establishes residency here, we're looking to change our housing stock potentially to meet certain income levels. But anyway, I'm sorry, but I just can't associate what you've done here with that bigger goal of a truly diverse population. So it seems to me like we should have a target in terms of a percentage of how much housing we have at various income levels. Cause I don't know that we wanna say, but it's already established the vision, very aspirational vision. But it seems to me like this is unachievable, basically.
It's possible, but I started out with my comments saying that we have a lot of challenges, right?
Yeah.
And however, this is the formula, these formulas are the formulas
That's
that are
kind of the
used to go
standard?
for,
Okay.
to go for grants and.
Best practices.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, so that's one of the reasons that this is incorporated into it. But also, I think gives you the revelation that, well, although it's not much of a revelation to realize that the poorest people can't find homes, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's part of my issue is if people just come and establish residency, then this plan is saying we will, get housing, or we will strive to obtain housing. So then does that throw the balance off the other way?
Well, I think it would, there's gonna be a 2020 census. And the 2020 census will give us more data too, and certainly more current data. With the data that we've used for this study, is from 2017 actually. So that's the mostly the latest data that's available.
Okay, and forgive me, I know that I wanna support this, I'm just very confused by it. So it may just entail me sitting down and spending a lot more time trying to digest all the data and understand how it connects to what I think is important is a diverse population in Manitou.
Right, well,
That can live here.
because we have so many challenges, so little land, so little buildable land, smaller units, right, we have a lot of small development, not big development, nor do we have really space for big development. What I'm doing is I'm taking it a day at a time. That's all we can do. If you're gonna do anything, I don't wanna be overwhelmed by the need for 71 more units, but we want to all aspire towards achieving as much as we can.
Yeah, anyway, and I'm not framing my questions very well, so I apologize for that.
That's all right.
I can comment on that, a little bit, and I understand the confusion, we've grappled with this, it's like, first you understand it, then you don't, and it's confusing. But I think basically they're trying to look at, okay, what are the income levels and that we need in rent levels for a spectrum of needs. And this is aspirational, but you need to understand what an individual in different categories would pay to not be cost burdened. And grant funders wanna understand that, and developers of affordable housing wanna understand that. And I think as the board delves further into understanding project feasibility, we'll learn more about how to balance that. And it may not quite be achievable, we might end up providing more rentals in the 31 to 51%. We'll just, that'll be a learning curve.
One comment on that as well. The mayor brought it up both ends of the spectrum. I've always thought that the market can take care and adjust for the needs and cover. In fact, the market with the upper incomes, entry into our market may go a long ways into restoring dilapidated housing if we let that occur and if we incentivize that. The biggest challenge that we have in this day and age with the market is for those people of lower income. And it's always a back and forth on how as to how we address innovation versus regulation. And I always find myself arguing on the side of innovation. I think we've got too much of a focus on regulation. And so I think one of the things that we can do to really bring this community back to the way that it was is to intervene on the lower end by innovation, and particularly with utilizing the land trust models. We had a meeting last night and we've identified some ways to do that. It's painfully slow to be able to put action to theories, because they are theories. But if we experiment with it, and I think that Councilman Rohr's earlier example or question about, regional building, I'm not a fan. And I remember when regional building was over there in the big room and they were making their presentation as that we will do this, as it were, in the discussion. Made it very uncomfortable. So I would like to see experimental innovation capacity from Manitou Springs so that we can start to turn this thing around.
Any more questions on this slide, folks?
Yeah, I'd like to just make a comment on that. We had huts for TB patients.
You have what?
We had huts.
Huts, yes.
It's not that far off from a tiny home, but if we just keep going down the regulation path, we won't have anything that helps solve this problem or honors our heritage. And I don't know how to solve that problem, but I watch it in every meeting I come to that deals with regional building, is we move further and further away from ever being able to do that with every code upgrade we do. And it's just one of those things that if there's things that trouble me on council, that's one of them. Because we were founded with a lot of diversity and some really small units based on health and wellness, and we move so far away from that.
So I almost sent you all, a study that DOLA published on how to achieve affordable housing. And they have a series of recommendations, specific different recommendations of overcoming regulatory barriers. And nationwide, there's a movement now, to increase density, to change setbacks, or perhaps to do what one of the things that our planning director has indicated is that we need to adopt a planning unit development code so that we can customize the use of some of these unusual lots that we have and requests that we have for projects. The reason I didn't send that to you is, first of all, it's quite a lot to read. And secondly, it's being revised, and the study that they have right now that's available, that I can send you a link to, is from 2017, but it's being revised right now. So with your permission, I'll send it out once it is revised. I'll be really interested in looking at what that has to say too. But regulatory barriers, just like you were saying, just what is always enforced by regional building, right? With some reason, I understand, we don't want houses falling down, but it's old-fashioned. Housing needs are changing. The idea that we all need, the 2,500 foot single family home, that's not how the demographics is working out anymore. And probably the organization that I know of that best understands that is ARC. ARC just published another book called Making Room, with a lot of statistics about that we're using as a reference as well. So there's lots of ideas. The problem that we have is, where's the land, where are the buildings, where's the money? So you might ask, why aren't you going after grants? Well, I attended on July 11th a DOLA housing forum for the state, and it was very well attended. And during that presentation, they said that what they do is they provide grants primarily for those that are in the greatest need, you know, and so there's a lot of homeless programs. And then they tend to give grants to experienced builders or project developers like Ratio Housing, who can then build large developments. And we don't have space for like a 50-unit development here. So, you know, by the time you go through the application process with them, we wouldn't qualify. However, I said that that's changing. The nation, the U.S. Department of Housing is recognizing the national need, or the trend towards homelessness and just people falling out of homes. That's literally what's happening. You know, their car breaks down and they can't afford to fix it, or they have an accident, they get sick, and they lose their home. 50% of homeless people actually have jobs. They may not be full-time jobs, but they have jobs. It's not like they're all bums, like some people think. So, our local, just wanted to say, but what they're really, adding a lot more money over beginning in 2020. The state will have a lot more money for housing, and they also told us at that forum that they feel like they've matured enough that they're no longer reacting, they're becoming proactive, and they're seeking creative ideas for dealing with housing. Of course, they service a lot of, there are a lot of grants available for rural areas that aren't available for us. We're not considered rural, I guess. I don't think.
I think we are,
Are
actually.
we?
Under the USDA, we are, I believe.
Oh, that's good to know, because that makes a difference. So we're gonna have once our plan is passed, we have an assigned DOLA representative. And we're gonna lead him on a tour, we're gonna talk about some projects that we have in mind, and ask him for ideas, and ask him to advocate for us on the state level. So that'll make a difference.
Ask a question. One is, there's kind of two issues. One is the mix of housing, and the other is potentially increasing density.
Yeah.
And, are you guys taking, I know it's kind of outside of your preview, but the, redundant water systems, because with one reservoir, obviously it's a consideration even at the density we're at. And two is, you might wanna come to the mobility study to talk about if density is increasing, how that will impact on mobility within the city.
Right.
So just two.
Yeah, well, certainly, before any development would go through, it would have to be ascertained that there's enough water supply and sewage, enough infrastructure for that. Is that what you meant by the water?
Yeah, I just think it's important, it's the mix and density, and they have different second and third term effects.
Yes, yeah, we do understand that.
Let's move on to objectives and targets, if that's okay.
Okay. All right, so they are increased reinvestment in housing. And when we get to our final slide, I'll talk about one program that we are part of that is doing that.
I was curious in the targets, for instance, increase in home renovations that target energy efficiency, safety, and resiliency. Will you be putting any specific goals, measurable goals to that increase by 20%, 50%, whatever the measurement is, whatever the goal is? Will you be assigning or trying to say, okay, we know we've met that objective if we do blank?
I don't think we have specific goals for that, to tell you the
I
truth,
didn't
but
see them in there, I just wondered if you would
just
be
to have
developing that.
an increase, yeah.
So you do, if you have an increase, if you have one, you've increased it, is that good?
Better than
Move
none,
on?
yeah.
I was just curious
Yeah.
if you were going to,
Yeah.
if there was some way to establish specific targets, not, number targets, whether you.
You know, I,
thought of that.
Plan Manitou, something in here, said, for measuring progress, this was a part of the housing and neighborhoods, the number of affordable rental and ownership units, the percent of households with housing cost burdens, just tracking those. And maybe that's another reason to have that gap analysis, because we have those figures as a baseline at this point. And most of these figures can be generated by going to the census website, by the way, and we can check that. Number of residents who live and work in Manitou, number of short-term or vacation rental units, average monthly rent, average home price compared to median income, number of homes that have made improvements to improve energy efficiency and safety or reduce hazard risk. So they didn't give us targets, but they suggested measuring those areas and keeping track of them. And if once we do have a strategic plan, if we come back with a report, we can perhaps put some numbers to these.
Can I make one comment on number 3 here, increase inventory of affordable rental units, plans and objective. We have come to a point in working with the Rocky Mountain Community Land Trust where if this council would give us strong encouragement to move forward with the Community Land Trust on city-owned property, I think that we could make really quick progress. And on the other hand, I think we can lose momentum extremely quickly because we're wavering at a point where we have their interest, we've been meeting with them, we started a year and a half ago, but we haven't been able to get over a hump as to how to employ them. We're putting too much of our eggs in the Cheyenne Village basket right now, I think, but we have some outstanding city-owned property that if we could get your encouragement to go to the land trust and say, the city of Manitou is very interested in seeing what we can do with assets that we already own, that we can, I don't use the word donate, I use the word invest in our community housing stock. And we could make some serious progress.
So I assume that would be part of the effort of the HAB is to come forward with a proposal. I don't think council's gonna say, yeah, you can have city land unless we hear where,
That's right.
when, how, and so forth.
We've been evaluating, a number of sites that are city-owned, for buildability essentially. And a number that we've evaluated, they were given to the city, as utility easements and those very easements, prevent us really from being able to build on some of them, but we're not done yet.
Okay, so rather than go through each one of those, I guess I'd like to ask if council or anybody else has any questions on any of the 6 objectives and targets that are listed there and in our packet. Okay, you're none?
Okay.
I got one comment.
Yes.
To, market driven, to increase housing stock in Manitou, we don't have much land. And, we historically have a lot of cottages. And what we call these now is additional dwelling units. It's by putting a smaller unit, you can have people aging in place, and it can be anywhere from 200, 400, 600, 800 square feet. Converting a garage, converting a basement. And additional dwelling units, there's something that's quick, that's fast, but we can add stock and manage it real quick. And we've been working on it for 2 years and haven't done it.
I think we have a next topic. If we get through this one, we'll get to the next one, which is that topic.
Yeah. All right, and so this is an example of our housing action plan, and the strategy is, in this case, incentives, and the action is to identify high-impact incentives to recommend, to encourage developers to provide housing to meet the city's needs. And here you see the Manitou codes, again, you know, decreasing regulatory barriers. We do have, interview with developers and builders, you know, a lot of times, most developers and builders wanna make money, they're not like Ratio Housing. I have toured a couple of our, Route 66 motels, with the director, with Lee Packey, the director of Ratio Housing, because, they're eyesores, many of them, and they have a lot of units that perhaps could become, full-time residents. And after looking at one of them, basically Lee said that that they're so dilapidated that in order to bring them up to habitable standards that would be appropriate for, you know, that the government would approve to give them the money to repair these by the time you pay the cost of the purchase and then did the rehabilitation, it wouldn't be affordable anymore. And of course, that's his mission. So, you know, one of the things I was thinking that would be good to bring as a project to, our DOLA representative is like, how can we get some support from the local housing division and take on one of these projects, so. But, you know, it's just another challenge that we have.
Any questions on, so there are 8 strategies laid out, and then 4 next steps. Actually, there are only 4, is there another slide with the other 4?
There is,
Okay.
yeah.
There is,
Yeah.
so there are 8 strategies. Any questions on any of those strategies? Obviously need to be flushed out, in terms of actions. Council, any questions, any concerns about any one of them up there?
I would just like to ask, with regard to, number 4, repurpose existing buildings for housing, we don't always know when a building is for sale. And so I ask you, if you hear about that, let us know. Cause, you know, we couldn't consider any kind of repurposing unless we know it's there.
The Briarhurst and, Blue Skies is for sale.
I know.
3.8 million plus another, I can't remember what.
Right, Tim Lee suggested it'd be a great place for, senior citizens. It would, but you know, do you have an extra $6 million?
Another repurpose is the possibility of the housing in the back. There's only 2 apartments there now. There's a strong possibility there could be 4 to 6 apartments there now, increasing their annual revenue, which they desperately need, and increasing our stock of housing. That's a repurpose that we can.
Yeah, and we're looking at evaluating the land behind the MAC on High Street. There's a strip as well. That the word is that, well, it's owned by CSU. And it's that strip that contains the abandoned water line that they replaced a couple of years ago. And the word is that they're gonna give it to the city of Manitou Springs. And that has not happened yet. They still are committed to that, we hear from Bill Bolge, our representative, our account manager at CSU. And when that happens, you might get a letter from us asking if we can have something to say about what happens there, so.
Becky, did you have a question?
No, I was,
Any other questions concerning the strategies? And then I think you're moving into the actions.
Our priority actions, yeah.
On item number 3, Brothers Redevelopment, what is that?
I'm sorry, item number 3, where?
Priority actions.
Work with Brothers Redevelopment.
That's what's on here.
Oh, all right, Brothers Redevelopment. Well, Brothers Redevelopment, is a company that is based out of Denver, but also has an office in Colorado Springs. They are the contractor of choice for El Paso County Housing, for doing retrofits and rehab for income qualified homes. And, a lot of what they do is, they work with elderly, to provide, ramps and replace windows, doors, you know, really necessary things. but I'm pleased to let you know that just today we heard that we have partnered with them. Aaliyah and I have met with them a couple of times, and they have gotten CDBG funds for what they're calling a pilot project in Manitou. And it's, what they're adding, the reason that it's a pilot is that they're adding energy efficiency to just the straight rehabilitation. And the manager and owners of that particular business, who say that basically it's a nonprofit. But they are very excited about adding this as and hoping to be able to continue that into with the other region and with El Paso County looking over their shoulders. I'm sure they'll do a very good job. So this year, this is our first success really. They've got $20,000, they've only asked for $20,000, and basically they are planning on rehabbing 2 buildings in Manitou. 10,000 apiece, obviously. And we may, in our budget, we may be asking for some supplemental money to increase that. But it's a start, and we're really pleased. We're really pleased that we've got that. It's just a beginning. Like I said, we're aware of all of the dilapidated places.
The idea there is energy retrofits will reduce the overall monthly cost of living, so that becomes more affordable.
I have a single page on Brothers Redevelopment about what they do. If you want me to send it out to council, are you interested in that? Yeah, I'll send that out to you so you can be more familiar. But they're very well respected in the region.
Any other questions from council? The next step would be to put this on the agenda for adoption.
Yes.
Okay. We will look at doing that just as quickly as we can.
That would be so wonderful.
We are probably 30 days out, I'm guessing, on our agenda, but we will, as soon as we find a spot.
Well, thank you.
And coordinate the time so that
Right.
it works for you guys.
Right.
Anything else that anybody from council would like to see done to this before it moves on to the next day for approval, adoption? Okay.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, everybody. Karen, thank you.
I was just gonna say that the HAP is a really great board, and Aaliyah Jermaine is not here, or Jermaine is not here, and she would be part of it as well.
Oh, yeah, Aaliyah has family in
We're gonna move right into the next discussion, which
She's a
follows
real
very, very closely, I think. The next discussion is the community engagement process for the accessory dwelling unit ordinance. How about that?
Okay.
Okay.
I'll stay.
No, you don't have to stay there, because I don't think you're part of the community. We're not discussing the ordinance, we're discussing the community engagement part of it. But Andy, I know you will be right in there in terms of offering your thoughts and suggestions. Ms. Johnson, I think that this is your topic. We do have in front of us, or in our packet, a worksheet, maybe we can pull that up. Karen, if you could bring us back to our.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah, so somebody's gonna need to adjust that. Could you bring us back to our agenda there? Figure out. But in the meantime, how would you like to work through this, Ms. Johnson?
So basically what we have here, two questions or two topics that we're looking for direction on this evening. One primary question is if the city council wants to take the accessory dwelling unit ordinance through the community engagement and governance process, similar to the short-term rental ordinance, and then if so, then to take a look at this worksheet which staff has started and go through this with the HAB to sort of fill it in, change it, add, subtract from it, so that we can move forward. The primary objective is to, if we're going to take it through this process, with this ordinance, what we want to do is we want to get the worksheet done, and then we want to start forming the project team, because we'd like to get that project team in place, have them start working on the plan for community engagement, and the idea that I have is that we would have a first community engagement or a community meeting with the small group facilitated discussions, to get input before we would write a scope of work and go out with a proposal to get, consulting services to assist us with this. And then once we have a consultant on board, we can move forward with the process. But the idea is to have one community engagement session first to kind of figure out kind of what the roadmap is, what the big issues are, and move forward in that way.
And you're looking at doing that when?
As soon as possible. The idea here is that the actual project will probably not get started until after the first of the year, just because of the timing it's gonna take to, get the planning team in place, have that first meeting, then develop a scope of work and a request for proposals and then get proposals. So, it'll lag a little behind the short-term rental ordinance, but that's not such a bad thing, just because there's a workload issue with that as well, and also, we don't really want the two to conflict with each other, or we don't want the waters to be muddied about, well, you know, what do we do about short-term rentals and accessory dwelling units? To me, that's part of the accessory dwelling unit discussion.
So the question for council is, are these questions, A through F, the questions, concerns, or opportunities that we're asking be addressed, or should they be changed? Are there other ones?
Yeah, this goes to my question that I asked Corinne earlier about, availability of water and, increased density impacts on mobility within the city.
So impacts to utilities and infrastructure in general?
Yeah.
And if you mean by infrastructure, meaning transportation, roads, and so forth?
In general.
Okay.
Working with
Absolutely.
That would be great.
No, I just have a question about that, because are we asking the same thing at the Holiday Inn? I mean, if we're gonna ask residents and.
You remember I voted to try to get that.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I don't think to put that on the residents, I think that's a community-wide, it's not just the ADU residents.
I
need to be aware of
this
that.
is the place to start the
And I think
discussion.
tourism
The larger
consumes a
discussion.
huge
Hold on, the
amount
question
of-
is what the issues are. We're not gonna solve the issue. The question is, do you want the issue addressed in this discussion?
I like that issue, but not on the ADUs
So you don't
specifically,
want to have a discussion about the impacts that these would have on
the
infrastructure?
water issue,
You don't wanna have that discussion?
not in here, cause I think it's a community-wide, it's not just the ADUs.
Okay, so let's get some consensus about, do we want to add the question of infrastructure discussion, the implications to infrastructure as part of this conversation? Becky suggesting she doesn't wanna see that. How about others?
Isn't that already addressed in our code now?
Well, I think the question is that, so one of the ideas behind the accessory dwelling unit ordinance is that you would allow an additional dwelling unit where it typically isn't allowed by zoning. And so there is a consideration that you could have a fair impact on density. But we haven't even, you know, some of the things, the other things that need to be considered is, you know, okay, what lot area do you need to have in order to have an accessory dwelling unit? That's another thing we need to consider. And then based on that, how many of those lots do we have and what would the potential impact even be? Maybe there isn't gonna be that much of an impact. And so there's all of these sort of layers and questions that, quite frankly, the community is probably going to come up with, and we'll have to decide at some point if we're going to explore those and answer those. But in general, we should always consider, when we consider new development, what their impact is on our infrastructure. And we should understand what we can support for development with our current infrastructure.
Karen, can you see if you could pull up the worksheet?
Mm-hmm.
That'd be great. Okay, I think that answered Becky's concern, is that there already, we have in place, provisions to address the type of infrastructure questions. Sounds like.
For new development.
For new development,
For
and,
new development.
you know, typically, yeah, for new development.
Are there other issues that we'd like to add to this? I see your hand.
Okay.
If you'd like to add an issue, that'd be great, but we're not gonna debate a topic here.
Okay.
So if you'd like to add an issue that you'd like to see, or a question that you'd like to see, this is a good time for that.
We've worked 2 years, and a few of us we came up with an ADU ordinance, 95%.
The question is, what issues, what questions, concerns, or opportunities would you like to see be addressed? That's what we're talking about right now.
I just don't think it needs to go through the process.
Okay.
And there's a lot of discussion on, within HAB about that.
Okay.
As to whether or not we're over community engaging our processes.
Okay.
And whether or not some of the other processes might be hurt by trying to, fold another one into it too quickly.
Perfectly germane comment, thank you, appreciate that. Okay, and council will need to weigh in on that, do we want to go through a community engagement process or not? And I guess that is a threshold question of how we wanna handle it.
Has council answered that question yet, all of council?
I think
Have we addressed that?
that's what we're here to address.
Okay. What say you, council?
Other communities that have housing groups and look at ADUs still have community engagement specific to ADUs. Cause it can be a big change to a neighborhood and the look and feel of a neighborhood.
Yeah.
Durango did that, and if you're in what I like to call the grid, the streets and avenues part of Durango, gazillion ADUs, and to me it's really blocks views to have that extra unit that's 2 stories up high. So I think it needs to have a community engagement component to it outside of the Housing Advisory Board.
Oh, we do too. Well, we totally understand that the community needs to weigh in.
That's a
It's
question
just,
on the table, I was just answering.
yeah, okay.
Let's see if folks agree to that comment and see whether we should move forward with this. I heard a couple suggestions from there that we didn't necessarily need, maybe you weren't being that specific about it, but that was the implication.
How long is the recommended community engagement process gonna take?
I don't think it's been defined in terms of how long, but I think it's a good question to try to set some time frames to
Yes.
it. Probably would be very helpful to set expectations.
Actually,
Oh, it does say that? I'm
Well-
sorry, excuse me.
that's the entire process though, that's not just the community engagement process, and actually, if you look at our timeline, we have, talked about this at the CEGW work group meetings, and we've talked about that engagement would consist of 3 to 5 community meetings, including 2 to 3 small group facilitated meetings and 1 to 2 community meetings. So, there's ranges there, but with the vacation home rental ordinance, with that one, we've talked about 2 to 3, small group facilitated meetings. Now, I'm not sure, if that process, I'm thinking that we still need to have like a broader community engagement process, like I said, at the beginning, and I don't know what that looks like, maybe it is just one of these small group facilitated discussions. The planning team will figure that out, but, so we have put sort of some limitations on that, some estimations of what it would take. The 7 to 9 months was, that number came from the consultant that I contacted about an estimate for the project so that I could do budgeting and also time budgeting. And they said they estimated 7 to 9 months, including the community engagement process from start to finish.
Great.
Can I just put a little twist on the question of community engagement? It's not that we don't, I agree, I think we do need a community engagement process. The question is focusing it, because the need or the concerns or the opportunities for ADUs are different in Ruxton than they are at, Crystal Hills. I think that the community engagement could be actually expanded to create what we talked about with the last interim planning directors, which was to create some structure of neighborhood planning groups that can be more specifically engaged in this issue in their neighborhoods.
I think that is listed as D, in a sense. Should standards be the same for ADUs in all zoning districts? And I assume that question would encompass what you just described. Alright, so, let's go back to the first question. Does council want to proceed with this kind of format? If so, are these the questions, concerns, and opportunities that need to be addressed? If not, what should be changed? It's a really important step that I don't think that we've done, we haven't done it on every project, but the projects that we have done it on, I think have been helpful when council sets out that expectation. These are the questions we're trying to address. There may be others that'll come up as we discover this, but what's council's thought in general about, does this generally cover the kinds of issues you'd like to see explored?
I like all the questions, but I'm wondering about what zoning district should ADUs be allowed in? What zoning district should they not be allowed in? Seems like, you know, it's, an ADU could be a penthouse, you know, it's like, where would we not want them?
Well, and some districts allow for mixed use. You know what I'm saying? So then would that really be an accessory dwelling unit? Probably not. What we're really talking about here is adding additional units in residential zoning districts.
So lot
Are you
size would
talking
be a
like-
factor, the lot size of the property.
Would it? That's not a question.
Yeah, I know, that's not a question, I'm just wondering about this,
Good question.
Yeah.
I mean, hillside low density, I mean, what are we saying that it would not be appropriate in? I'm just reversing the question, cause I can't answer what they should be allowed in, so where should they not be allowed? Does that make sense? I mean, that might be easier to answer, like, where don't we want them?
So, are we gonna add that question, everybody want to, I mean, it's a corollary question, where should they be allowed, and Councilman, Elder suggesting, or should they not be allowed? Andy, unless if you've got something to add to that question, I'm trying to streamline this if you can.
Yeah, what we were originally in our proposal is just the general residential.
We're not answering your question, we're just identifying what questions we're going to address.
Okay.
I think that's a question you may still want to address in community engagement,
Okay,
as you embark on this, talking with different residents and homeowners.
And Karina had added one that I don't think had been captured here.
Lot size,
Okay,
you know, we have a regulation about lot size for a second unit, but it's very prohibitive and it's one of the, you know, it's our lot size requirement is much bigger than most places, so we would like to change that.
so we're adding a question, what should be the minimum lot size?
What should be the minimum lot
That's
size?
C. That's C.
What are the standards for appropriate,
Yeah, that's
you
what
were
I'm saying.
saying.
See, I
Thank you.
have all kinds of specifics that we worked on, but these are supposed to be general
Yes.
questions, aren't they? And then the
Yes.
specifics, the work group itself would do the specifics,
Perfect.
right?
That'd be
But,
good.
you know, we've done a lot of basic work for this and have some good resources to bring to the ADU work group, I think.
Okay. Other questions and the general question. So is there anything else in number one? What questions, concerns, opportunities need to be addressed?
Along with lot size, you could, hypothesize what's the access to be. So is the access to be on this, you know, common drive of the base unit? Can it be, can it be an alley, can it be through another street, a back street, you know, on the opposite side of the property?
That would probably come under standards, but you may have that highlighted, but yeah.
Standards.
A lot size too, I mean, the access. Anything else? Alright, who's interested or impacted, there's a whole group of people, that have been identified here, including the general population. I think the intent here is to put as many as we can, such that in the reach out, we reach out to as many people as possible. So, I think this is a pretty comprehensive,
I think, perhaps adding senior citizens to this,
okay,
because, the Granny Flats is what started the whole ADU concept. And Jeannie Devant, who brought the resolution, or what is it? Age-friendly community, Manatee Springs is an age-friendly community, right? If the meeting's at the right time, she'd like to participate.
okay, great. That's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
Anything else in terms of who should be listed, particular, groups or demographics or whatever?
I find A to be interesting because ADU is defined, can be attached to a house, doesn't have to be separate from the house. In other communities, I hate to start defining things too early.
So you would change that property owners who have either existing attached or detached.
I would just kind of get rid of A, because B
Yeah.
pretty much covers it.
Okay.
That's true.
Because I don't want people to not think a little bit different than just a suburban. It's not what other communities do.
Okay. Good comment. Anything else to add to this? Yes?
I was thinking of some of the Cheyenne Village folks, or maybe some of the parents of some of those folks, I feel like Mary Snyder or Ralph Broughton, that I think they're gonna try to struggle to figure out a place for their sons and daughters.
Okay. So individuals with special needs.
I would add a percentage of lot coverage / minimum lot size.
Back to the questions.
Well,
Okay.
next one that.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's part of development standards.
Probably so.
yeah, that's.
Anything else in terms of 1 or 2?
Just in terms of the question of attached ADU, Jay, what's the differentiation between that and the duplex?
Essentially nothing, depends how you think about it. So there's some great properties in Crystal Hills that have very large basements that can be turned into an ADU, which would include a complete kitchen essentially and separate access. And some communities have rules around what that has to look like. So locked door here, access this way, that type of thing. And so there are lots of places in Crystal Hills that could actually be great for aging in place if you could get some rental income from your unused basement.
So that in a
Build
sense
out, so
could
that's
be
an
called a
ADU.
duplex.
It
Wouldn't
could be.
normally be thought of it that way, but
But it's not a typical duplex thing. I guess it depends how your community defines duplex. So
Right.
and we do have a definition of a duplex in our code.
Yeah,
So-
which is part of our current problem.
Yeah, it just depends on how, but all of those things are accessory dwelling units. You could have a wing on your house. What does that wing, what are the standards around having a wing on your house and having it be an ADU versus just having it be your library because you like books? And these are all wrapped up into standards. And you could have, there's even questions about them in number 1 if you want, but it's really not the point of number 1. It's the point of the group to get to all those questions and define what all those things are for our community.
So you're suggesting that an ADU that is attached might have some unique specs that would not apply to a detached one and would not apply to a duplex would be the third category?
Correct.
Got it.
Sure.
Are you capturing that?
So let's say lot size. Let's say lot size. If you're gonna put a separate building on lot size, then you want a lot size consideration. If you're gonna build a wing, lot size is consideration. If you're gonna use your basement, who cares so much about lot size? So all these different things play a big role in what this is gonna look like when it comes before us to pass. And it's what all these people are gonna have to figure out, but it's not part of the questions, it's just standards. What are those standards and what is this gonna look like for us?
The one thing I would say about the accessory dwelling unit versus a duplex is definition, because by definition, an accessory dwelling unit is supposed to be related to but subordinate to. So if you have a Rambler that's, whatever, 2,800 square feet and 1,400 square feet is in your basement, that would be a duplex as opposed to an accessory dwelling unit because it's the same size, it's not subordinate to. So that's kind of why we write these, and then there's usually, like I said, there's some density bonuses and those kinds of things. But then there's other things that limit what you do there, like maybe it has to be owner occupied or, there's all these different things that different communities do. And I think that's gonna be part of it, is exploring what some of those other communities have done.
so moving on to number 3, unless there's something
I do
else.
have one possible addition to number 2.
Okay.
And I would say existing non-conforming units. What Karen mentioned when she did the initial housing inventory for Plan Manager, that she encountered a number of rentals that really would be considered ADUs. but, you know, we don't have them listed that way. One of the things that Glenwood Springs did when they did their ADU ordinance is they had like a clemency period for people to come in and basically have to bring it up to the code. But, you know, they weren't fined or, you know, they weren't chastised necessarily for that. But, you know, this could be a vehicle for identifying those and bringing them into compliance.
I just thought of an issue that I think we might add, and that is how are utility rates charged? I think that's been an issue. Is it a commercial rate? Is it a residential rate? What should it be? And so I think that's an issue that we might want to look at as well.
Utilities and taxes, right?
Taxes we won't impact as much. That would be an assessor, but utilities we do. We make the decision whether it's charged a residential or commercial rate. And so I think we need to at least have that conversation. I'm not suggesting an answer in any way, shape, or form, but I think it is an issue that goes along with this discussion.
I would agree with you.
So,
Well, I'm suggesting also, is it a commercial, is it a commercial entity given, you know, it's basically, one could extend it, it sounds like having apartments.
I'm just saying we have to have that conversation, so,
There's some tax distinction too, possibly.
and there may be for that as well. Okay, let's move on to number 3 in terms of what's the desired outcome. It seems to me that all of them, I don't know if we have particular conflicts that we're dealing with, we might, but it seems like we're trying to accomplish all of those in the process.
Yes.
Everybody agree? Is there anything on there that probably doesn't make any sense? Okay. And then we go through the 4 in terms of consideration and engagement process, resources available, resources needed, budget, timeline, legal and other. Any questions about A through F? Additions, things we should take off, etc.
A through F,
A
other,
through F and number 4. A through F.
number 4, on number 4F,
Yeah.
do we need?
4F is other.
Yes,
Yeah.
I always wonder, right. Should we get planning commission approval?
Yeah, there'll be a formal process for adoption of the ordinance, once we come up with it.
And that will go through planning commission,
And
so that
city
doesn't
council.
need, that's just a
Kind of a
ordinary,
given.
okay.
So
Doesn't hurt to have it there though, I'll acknowledge it.
one of the things that I would like to see for the engagement process is a visual timeline laid out so that people know, for instance, what you just said. It's gonna go through the planning commission. Great. Let's lay that out in the process so that we know that people can understand that's what's gonna happen. There'll be a public hearing there, et cetera, in addition to everything else. So it'd be great to have a visual timeline, I think, of the steps that we're gonna go through. Anything else on A through F in number 4? What are the considerations?
$50,000, is that a pretty safe amount? I mean, it's a lot of money. A lot of money.
It is a lot of money, I don't have a lot to gauge it by in Colorado. I got a whole zoning ordinance done for about $85,000 in Arizona. So, you know, I just asked one source, it was a consultant that we've worked with, that's done a lot of work, they're familiar with the community and our codes. So I reached out to them and that's the number I got. It was a range, I went in the middle of the range. We won't use it if we don't need it. We will have to seek, obviously have to seek, proposals, so, if we don't need it, we won't use it.
However, we could use it to have them craft a planned unit development ordinance, which we do need.
Different subject. Anything else on number 4? What considerations for this engagement process? A through F. Okay. Number 5, I'm assuming we're looking to partner with the community to assure the concerns, aspirations, and alternatives are considered and included to the extent possible in decisions and actions. People interested in and affected by these issues will be heard, valued, and respected. Is that the goal that we're trying to come up with? As opposed to empower, partner with the public in each aspect such that we will fulfill the consensus decisions. Everybody okay with what's checked there, which is the collaboration process? council will make the ultimate decision on that. Okay, number 6, people who are interested, let's see, council shall identify community members of an interest in being on the project, being either a project coordinator or on the planning team. So if anybody has names, you can throw them out to Kim now for somebody who might be on the planning team, or get them to her. You are working on that, as I understand it?
We are, so the planning commission and the have selected representatives, and, we've obviously identified staff, participants, and, I do have some, quite a few that have expressed interest in the vacation home rental ordinance, and some of them have been asked if they would be willing to be on this one instead, so we do have a few. We did put out, something in the paper, for the vacation home rental because, we were a little off balance, and so we wanted to try to generate some additional interest, so.
So just to be clear for everybody, the planning team is not making decisions. The planning team is helping to plan the process only. So people say, well, I wasn't in on the planning team, I've got opinions about this. Great. You'll have a chance to voice those opinions. The planning team is planning the process, just so that it's clear.
Planning the process and facilitating it, I would say, to try to help bring people in, to disseminate the information and to guide the process, I guess, is what I
That's
would
even
say.
better too. Great. Any questions about 6? If you have suggestions, get them to Kim sooner than later. Thank you, Alan, for the representation from the planning commission. I think what we're putting together is the 2 boards coming together to kind of be the core of it, if you will, which is great. That's probably the first time we've done that as well, is bring 2 of the boards, commissions together to actually help move this forward, which is great. So, some consensus about whether we should give any other direction to Ms. Johnson, or are we ready to let go and say, go forth? Go forth? Go forth? Anybody?
Moving on.
Go for the process, yeah.
Okay,
Whatever that
good. Ms. Johnson, anything else?
No, thank you, I have what I need.
Great, thank you very much. Yes?
Is it just me or is it hot in here?
I'm not gonna weigh in
I think
on
it's warm.
that.
I would love to open the window.
If I'm not cold, it's warm.
We're past that.
We could try to open the window. City administrator report, do you have anything for us real quick?
Just a couple of quick things, worked on with the city clerk, which was your the next meeting, and with that, public works, we're working on that. Attended the school board meeting and council joint meeting, meeting with staff and looking at staffing over the last little bit, getting acquainted. And, next week we'll be doing the training on the budget process, so that would be open go. And, next week we have August 14th is the planning commission at 6 p.m. and August 16th is the URA at 8:30 a.m. here.
Okay. Any, what was the next topic? I got council correspondence. I had one topic. I wanted to just let people know that there is a telephone, town hall concerning your transportation plan. CDOT is in the process of gathering input about a new transportation plan. Our region, which is Region 2, the telephone town hall will be on Thursday, August 15th, starting at 5:30 p.m. There is an email with a phone number. If anybody's interested, let me know. You can also participate online, and I'd be glad to forward this email to anybody who would like to participate in that. Any other correspondence?
I just want to pass on, I've been contacted by a couple of people that, and I passed it on to Denise last night, but, totally impressed with our interim chief. I mean, I've been asked the same, why can't we keep him? And I said, well, that's his decision, but I just wanted to, where kudos are made, we don't really hear that much anymore. He's out there, he's in the middle of everything, and he's doing a positive influence for us, so.
Great. Any other correspondence?
And just to piggyback on that, the Crystal Park Road traffic thing is a good example of what Gary just said, because I talked to Denise at Kona today, and he's already been trying to interface with that neighborhood about what they might do to help the speeding, and it was the same exact thing that Gary said. They had not been getting responses at all, and now they got an immediate response.
I couldn't believe the one response that was written there.
Yeah, me either.
On the car? Or no?
The citizens arrest.
Well, that.
That amazed me totally.
Yeah, okay. Anything else, Coach?
Yes, can you forward that note about the CDOT thing to Felicia to put on the community calendar?
I can, it's coming up very quickly, but let me see if we can, it's this Thursday, August 15th. Pretty quick. I'll see if we can get it on there, okay?
Just a quick item, Denise, you may be aware of this, I believe the general public access to the city council agenda for tonight, the links were not up there working the hot links.
Okay.
So when the general public accesses the council packet, they have their choice on the left-hand side to find a hot linked agenda, and on the right-hand side, the full package, 242 pages. That structure was missing this week.
I might mention that there were some issues with Novus they're working with.
Correct, I think Roy, those were last week's, but it's a
If you did scroll down though, it was there. If you went to the website and scrolled down under council minutes and agendas, it was all the meeting stuff was there.
Okay, let's not solve that problem at
Just
the
so you
moment
know,
here.
I mean, I just wanted to let you know.
Anything else from council in terms of council correspondence? We're gonna adjourn this meeting.
I'll be out of town next week. Gary is going to be signing checks for, finance next week,
Okay.
this weekend, next week.
Anything else? Alright, our work session is adjourned. We are anybody need a break?
I need the window open.
Need a window open, okay. Can someone help us on opening the window while anybody need it? You want a short break? We are entering into a special meeting.
Well, I just don't and then it's there, and then any links. This doesn't have an attachment like it'll show up on the cover sheet, so biography is there. So all of it's here. No, what I did is I went to it, let me show you how I got to it, because it's normally when you go to one place, let's see.
Okay, where is this? Oh, up there.
And then instead of the links like prior, okay, now, if you just go. There was a link that says go to documents on demand. So they're at the bottom of that, they're at the bottom of the agendas and minutes page. Yes, that's where they were. But they were there, because I looked at them this afternoon. I think there used to be a link that was right there. Because I don't know, people that did it that way, don't put it together.
She avoided going to the documents on demand.
And she wasn't showing going to the council page, but no pictures of that.
Yeah. Okay, we're ready to go. Yes,
I know, tell me it's not stronger and bigger.
Just so you know.
I'm sorry, people in
Don't go far. Yeah, I don't want to
I will, these should go really fast.
The first two will be 5 minutes each.
We're not up yet, it's like you're ready to hang out. So, thanks. I have 7 words staying in my phone, but just
We will call the special meeting of Manchester Spring City Council to order at 8:11 p.m. Roll call. Councilman Smith. Here. Councilman Todd. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Fortune. Mayor Gray is present. Councilwoman Elder. Here. Councilwoman Wilbur. Councilman Moore. Here. We're entertaining a motion to approve the agenda. I would like to point out that item 2, for those of you that somehow think that this item was added to the agenda, it was added to the agenda. So item 2 was added, and when we get to that topic, I'll let you know a little bit more background about that and so forth. But just to point out, if you were wondering, it was added to the agenda. So, would ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
I will we approve the agenda as printed.
Is there a motion, a second? Any further discussion? If not, please raise your hand affirmatively. All opposed? Agenda is approved.
May I ask who seconded that? I'm sorry, I'm still putting names together.
Councilwoman Elder.
Thank you.
We'll call item D1, appointment of acting city clerk. Judy Egbert, I don't know if all of you have met, or any of you have met.
Barely
Egbert?
tonight, so.
You want to just tell us a little bit about?
Sure. I'm a consultant, and this is what I do. I actually go out and enjoy helping towns through transitions and doing special projects. So I've retired city clerk from Alamosa, and for the last 5 years I've been doing consulting, and I just tallied up, I've worked for almost 30 jurisdictions in the last 5 years. So it's pretty interesting to get to know new communities and travel around a little bit.
There is a short version of Ms. Egbert's professional biography.
You know, and I did read some copies too.
It's on our packet, if anybody would like to see that. Unless there's any other questions, we do have an oath of office that we will administer. Any questions for Ms. Egbert? Nope.
Do we need to vote to appoint her?
I guess we do first, huh? Funny thing about it. Thank you. Come on, you're such a stickler for detail.
I make a motion to appoint Judy Egbert as acting city clerk.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, raise your hand affirmatively. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Go move forward.
Thank you. Minor detail. Are you ready?
Yes.
I, Judy Egbert,
I, Judy Egbert,
do affirm that I will support
do affirm that I will support
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of
the
Colorado,
Constitution of the State of Colorado,
and the laws of the State of Colorado.
and the laws of the State of Colorado.
I don't know why I'm raising my hand.
You raise your hand. Okay.
And will faithfully perform the duties of the office of acting city clerk, upon which I am about to enter, to the best of my ability. And will faithfully I gave you the short one.
I know.
And will faithfully perform the duties of the office of acting city clerk,
And will faithfully perform the duties of the office of acting city clerk,
upon which I am about to enter, to the best of my ability.
upon which I am about to enter to the best of my ability.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank
If
you.
you'd like to sign that. I don't know. That's a
I'm gonna let
really.
you sign this as the officiant of the
Alright. The question was asked why the Manitou City Charter isn't listed as one of those, and that's a good question.
I'll add that to my affirmation.
There you go. All right, thank you. Also, if somebody would thank Mr. Parker, who brought Judy to our attention, we very much appreciate that. All right, we'll call item D2, agreement for services with Schmidt Construction Company. So just a little background, we apologize about putting this on at the last minute. It has come to our attention, or we knew, that this item is coming before PPRTA tomorrow. It turns out, in searching this, we thought that perhaps we had approved the contract, and the council had approved the contract. What happened was council did see a contract for $330 some odd thousand to Schmidt Construction, I think it is, which incorporated this work, but that was supposed to come to us in a separate contract. They were broken out because there were separate pots of money. And one of them got done, this one apparently didn't. And so this is to clean that up so that tomorrow we can go to PPRTA, get approval, and get reimbursement. The work has already been done and completed.
Does it matter that it says Brad Walters is a staff member?
Well, Brad Walters started as the staff member who initiated
It's dated
this.
August 2019, that when you signed it, does that matter? I'm just asking if it matters.
I don't think that would matter. That would be my guess. I'll check that tomorrow, but I don't
Okay.
think that they,
Okay.
that shouldn't matter. Any other questions, about this contract?
I think it's important to note that this is Shelley's last act as our public works director to go and present this to PPRTA tomorrow, which is also a reason why this is on tonight, because it was really not prudent to delay it at this point. It's just cleanup. It's unfortunate cleanup, but nonetheless cleanup.
If there aren't any other questions, we can entertain a motion concerning item D2.
I move we approve the agreement to services with Schmidt Construction Company for PPRTA Street Services Improvement Agreement.
Second.
There's a motion, a second. Any further discussion? If not, please raise your hand affirmatively. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Oops, excuse me. We'll call item D3, an ordinance number 1419, an ordinance submitting a ballot issue regarding a 0.3% increase in the city's sales and use tax to the electors of the city of Manitou Springs at the November 5th, 2019 general municipal election, and setting the ballot title therefore. First reading. So we had talked about this just briefly. Ms. Johnson, you wanna come on up? Barbara, are you gonna join us on that? Anybody else joining us?
I brought copies of the letter that we gave you since we didn't get that in the packet.
So, here we are. Do you wanna talk briefly, just summarize for us your thoughts in terms of council moving forward with this? And if so, how do we, how do we address the issues that we've laid out and what we have?
Sure, so we received, from the city attorney last week, a revised version of the ballot measure that we've been working with. And, we reviewed it and met as a committee and had sort of two requests. And so the one request was that we look at extending the sunset, that we set at 15 years to 25 years, knowing that it would it would take probably about 22 years to pay off the library piece. And we weren't sure how we could actively go for an initiative that would only pay for 75% of a project. Like, we didn't know how to sell that or as a legitimate request of the community. And then the other piece was that we requested that, a small committee look at, we end up with 2 city council members and 2 match committee members, and then potentially a staff member, and potentially some kind of a financial analyst that would kind of look at what distribution would look like, since the addition of Hiawatha Gardens would be adding another additional multi-million-dollar project to something that would generate about $200,000 a year.
So one question is extending the sunset. We could have 15, 25, or none. I think there was a consensus to have some. And so the question is, what's the pleasure of council in terms of a consensus? And let me just start off by saying I feel a significant deficit, that's not maybe the right word, in making that decision. And the reason I say that is because I have not seen any forecast, projections whatsoever about what this would look like. And so normally when you're doing a project and you're doing a bond and you're doing this kind of financing, you understand what those numbers would look like. You described some of them, but I've not seen any. And so I would like to make the right decision. I don't know what basis to make that on.
So the $2.1 million estimate of what it would cost to complete the library is an estimate that you're questioning?
No, I'm questioning the time period to pay it off.
Okay.
Under what basis? Where's bond counsel that would sit here and tell us the answers to those questions, which would typically be what you would do if you're looking at a project of that sort. Hiawatha Gardens, the same thing. You don't understand the cost, you don't understand the scope, you don't understand the financing, and then you would set your parameters accordingly. How do we answer those questions?
So I guess just the way that I saw it sort of playing out would be that when this passes in November, that next year we would.
How do we answer the question to decide how many years it should be is I guess what I'm getting at.
Right, so that financial analyst that would break that down, that we would bring in for that.
We need to decide that tonight.
I understand what you're saying.
How do we answer the question on what basis is 15, 20, 25, 30? I don't wanna sell us short, probably don't wanna go too much either, so I'm struggling with what basis do we make that decision tonight of what's the right period of time to do this?
So the library is estimated at about 2.1 million, the Hiawatha Gardens is estimated at 8 million?
No, that depends on what you do.
Yeah.
If you do a parking structure, it's probably 10 million, et cetera, so it just depends on what you do.
And then the Art Center and the Heritage in Miramont Castle, would also be looking at funding, and so I believe that $200,000 is less than adequate to support all of those things. So if you're concerned that we're asking for too much money with the 25, I don't think you have to worry about that.
I don't know, is it too much or too little or not? I don't know.
It's too little, but, we're asking for 25, and I think that would be adequate.
Council, what's your pleasure in terms of the number of years that this should go out?
Before we talk about the number of years, Ken, I think you're on a very relevant point. And so I'd like to take Ken's point and ask us as a council to look at this resolution right from its infant beginning. It has two components to it. One component to it is capital improvement. And so capital improvement comes in two stripes. It comes with the library, 2.1 million. And if we just look at Hiawatha Gardens, for example, a historical building, forget the parking garage, as I recall the numbers, that's also like a $2.5 to $3.5 million project. So this is the capital component that we're trying to provide for with a tax increase. Just hold on to that point, capital component, because I'll come back to that. The other thing we're trying to accomplish with this tax increase solution is to provide grants and funding and operating capital for, there's three Marquette organizations, the MAC, Miramont, and the Historical Museum, which have been treated as one class of facilities organizations, and then there's what's referred to as the other nonprofits. So, coming back to the capital, if we were doing this, which it is a capital project, we would be talking about, do we have a project? What's the capital requirement? What's the bond? Key point, what's the bond? And what's the cost to carry the bond? Just like we saw the fire tower, you might remember this is the capital cost of it, we need to have a bond. And oh, by the way, with that bond approval, this was going to be the tax incremental funding that was required to pay it off. So, to some degree, I would suggest, along the lines of Ken's questioning, we really have the cart before the horse when it comes to this capital component of this proposal. Because we don't know what our capital bogey is, we don't know what the tax cost is. Those are unknowns. Discretionary money, the second item, which is funds for those three Marquette organizations, just to pick a term, and the other nonprofits, is very similar to what we used to do and what we used to call our community grants. In a lot of situations, organizations came forward and asked for a community grant. That's how the historic museum got its first $10,000 in the capital. That's how Poets and Pottery got their money, and so forth. So, as I see it, the intention of this is fantastic. I think the community does need to find a way to fund these organizations, absolutely. But I don't think the place to start is having, to a degree, the cart in front of the horse, because all we're talking about is a tax increase in tax monies not linked to a bond and not linked to a distribution system. We don't know who's in charge of dispersing money and how it's going to be dispersed. I think Natalie's done a fantastic job in her group doing a catch-up ball game on this, recognizing, as you have said, let's form a committee of people, figure out how we're going to do the distribution. As you have said, let's get a financial, an analyst to look at this and figure out what's the right way to deal with it, like it's just as apples, capital, oranges, grants. But that work's not done, so I think for this evening or the next council meeting, to approve a balanced measure generated by the city, it's not really totally thought out and composed. So my suggestion on this is, just like we have for the chamber, we have taken a portion of our general fund, and Jay, I'll be right, be done in a moment. We've taken a portion of our general fund functions, which are lodging and sales taxes, and we have, I believe by historical ordinances, an algorithm for how we distribute that money to the chamber. Now, the city did at a certain point in time when that annual funding exceeded $200,000. We did say for budget reasons we wanted to cap it down low, as we felt at that time more funds was disproportionate to what our general fund was. So there's two ways to skin this. I just want to point that out. We could take the will of the people who have signed the petition, which is substantial, 400 people, relatively quickly done, easily done. That's the will of our citizens, that we allocate money for this purpose. But if we want to do it now, I think the way we do it is we say not a tax increase, unless we think we have to have it, but we say when we build the budget, we're going to allocate not more than $300,000, but arguably, because we're not addressing capital, because we don't have a 10-year capital plan, but maybe the portion of $100,000 that's been asked for relative to grants and so forth. That's a big number. Our community fund used to be $50,000. That's double it. So I think that would provide the swing room these organizations need, the three marquee organizations, and the provision for grants. And we would be deferring this whole capital question because we don't have a library plan with a cost. We don't have a bond proposal. Same thing with Hiawatha. We don't know what the mobility study will say. We don't know how much of that's going to be allocated to historic and so forth. That's very long-winded, but thanks to Natalie, who's invested a lot of time with me, I think we've had 3 in-depth conversations on this. So she's really, the two of us are really kind of titrated through this, but I think we're just ahead of ourselves on this, unfortunately. Nobody would have desired that, but that's where we are. That's my view.
And so that I'm understanding what you're saying, you're suggesting not moving forward with this. You're suggesting committing to allocate, you were throwing out, let's say $100,000 as an example,
Right.
from the next year's budget to go towards or to go towards grants for the 3 organizations and other nonprofits.
Correct.
But not address the capital component at this point for 2020 budget. Is that what I heard you say?
Correct, and for the same reason that you brought up an aspect of it, which is what's the length of the term, but I'm just suggesting we can't really get to that until we know what the capital requirement is, what the tax rates are, what the interest rates are. That's what we did for the fire tower. We just haven't done that for this package.
Okay, so there's one suggestion.
Just one view.
Councilman Ward, did you?
Sure. The ordinance just says city promotion, doesn't say chamber.
Sorry?
The ordinance just says city promotion, not to the chamber, so it's very broad. So it's not to a group.
Got
This
it.
would be the first thing that goes to groups if you wanna do it that way. But my question was really
Good point, it's development,
Promotion.
promotion and development, or just
something like
promotion?
this, two
Yeah.
things, but,
Okay.
what are our dates on this? So, this is my first question.
She has, in what way? To get.
We have to pass this stuff by what time to get it to El Paso County and get it all wrapped up with a vote? I'm
The
sorry.
ballot certification date is September sixth, and that's the reason staff brought this to you at the special meeting, is to give enough time to get the posting out so that you could have a second reading on this next week at your regular meeting if you chose to go forward that way. That would be the only way that your action could make it onto the ballot.
Gotcha. And for Rebecca, hate to put you on the spot, but since you're here, how would we go about, I mean, I take it 2 weeks is not long enough to talk to a bond company and get this going.
I already have a bond council person I could, call tomorrow. But in terms of getting a bond on the next election, I think you're right. I think it would be very, I would have to call her and see, can we do this? Can we
I
get
think
something
we would
together?
have to incorporate that tonight, pass it on first reading, pass it on second reading, such that we'd have the language that we'd be ready to put on the.
Because you need a ballot title, and then keep in mind, you also need the, background material for your Tabor notice, for your, mailing. And that's a lot of the financial things that you're talking about.
Tabor notice would be me.
Right.
And I can do that. The question is, were you saying, can we get a bond question on the ballot? Bonding?
Yes, and can we get,
The Tabor
for all the
notice
things
is
these guys are
good.
talking about meeting, which
Yeah.
is the financial piece of it wrapped up tight so that we can explain it to people and pass it in the time frame that we need to pass it in. Can all of it be done, or should we just stop this part of the meeting because it can't be done?
I don't wanna say it can't be done, because I would need to talk to the bond council. That is like your most important person in terms of bonding.
And that is going to take some
So
time.
I could call her tomorrow and start the ball rolling, but I cannot tell you tonight whether, yes, it can be done, or no, it can't.
Alright.
Because the person that knows
It's
is at
tomorrow.
home.
Tomorrow. No, that's fine, that's fine, I just want everybody to know what the story is, and the dates that we have to work with, and how difficult this might be to get done at a level that people will be happy with.
So I think that we looked at it, and I could be wrong, but I think we looked at next year, we could spend that $100,000 to put all the construction documents together, work with HPC, work with planning, get everything approved, and then November of next year, we would say, without a tax increase, would the community willing to bond on the project? So that we were looking at next November as the bonding date, but that using this funding to get us to the point where the community would bond. But the request would not be for the tax increase next year, it would just be for the bond. I don't think any of us thought bonding was important personally tonight, just so you're aware. I think that we thought the funding was gonna be harder to achieve than getting the community to agree to bond.
So back to the question of time period. There are really two elements that we're trying to figure out tonight. One, do we go forward with this? Two, if we do, what are the parameters? One of the parameters being, is there a sunset? If so, how long? We've heard some conversation that it's difficult to assess what that is. 25 years may or may not be long enough. I don't think we know that at this point. What's the council's pleasure in terms of?
The 25 years would simply be, I mean, we can back into it, next year. So I'm fine with, I mean, I know that there's a lot of unknowns. I don't like to be in this position. But at this point, I would like to support this in going through and working through the details to, if we decide to do a bond, do it next year. I don't have any problem with that.
Are you okay with 25, or do you have another number?
No, 25 is fine. And we back into it, I mean, if that's how much we can bond for, that's how much we can bond for.
Question. Rebecca, we did the downtown, which just expired,
Mm-hmm.
which is why this whole thing has been brought up. How long was it for?
I believe it was for 20 years.
And do you know how much money it was for, off the top of your head, roughly, sort of kind of guesstimate? $3 million?
I can't remember right now, but here's the deal about that. That amount of money was not it wasn't ever planned to fund the whole entire cost of the downtown improvement.
Right.
It was to provide grant match. So you gotta see that money was then multiplied 3 times, you know?
Yeah.
So
I'm just wondering about the chunk of money that was expected.
it came in better than we anticipated because we were able to pay it off 2 years early. So it only ended up being 18 years. But we can't anticipate that happening again.
So one question is not to put a time period on it at all. Then you don't have to worry about that. You still have to worry about, you can only bond based upon the stream of revenue, but it doesn't have an end. And so they will account for that differently. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I think if you go with Natalie's thought about getting the tax increase now, you might never do bond on these, you might never do the library, you might never do Hiawatha, see my point? So the year you pick, if you go to bond, then you'll have to go back and ask the tax increase be adjusted, require a longer time horizon, requires a longer time horizon. But this also points another exposure to the community of this proposal. It's an implicit, that we're gonna do these capital projects off this tax money, but if we're not, the way the charter reads, then this money full bore is available to the 3 marquee organizations and the other nonprofits. You know, and if you never do the capital, which is 2/3 of the cost, arguably, which is a tax increase, then you've created outstanding inflated group of money compared to what the general public will think this increase is for, because the general public has already been tuned to it's gonna be a library. Recently they've been introduced to the fact that it'll be Hiawatha too. Now I'm a taxpayer and it's 3 years out and the project is happening and I'm wondering what's been happening with that $300,000 a year. And oh, by the way, how did we set that up to be distributed? Oh, we didn't really know at the time, but we've been making up as we go. That's where I get thrown off by it versus just saying, at this point in time, what we do know is these organizations do need funding. What we do know is 400 people support it. And let's support what we tangibly know, which is the need for grants and some operating subsidies is frankly what it comes down to. We don't know about the capital component of this.
So I think you're right, Bob. I think that there's no way a taxpayer would vote for that. That it is up to us to be able to communicate effectively to our residents that we have our act together, that we have a distribution plan in place, and if we don't do that correctly, this is not going to pass. Our residents are not stupid people. You know, they're gonna require some security in this, and I think we still have an opportunity to do that. We don't have an opportunity to do that tonight, but I do think that we have an opportunity to do that. But I think that you are absolutely right. Like, the community is not going to approve something where they don't know how it's gonna be distributed or what the outcome is gonna be. I think you're absolutely right.
So if you agree with that, I think, going to Jay's point, what can reasonably be pulled together, taking a risk that by second reading we have distribution of it, that's just enough to check, that's enough of a challenge to decide who's gonna be the gatekeeper on, let's say it's $100,000, who's gonna be the gatekeeper on that? A lot of where this initiatives come from has been the community saying, we would like that money set aside for that purpose for these organizations, and let these organizations and their representatives work out what the distribution should be and have their rules for what's the hurdle rates and so forth. Don't have council involved with that. It's a unnecessary process for councils. Council's not that close to these organizations. You know, that's part of the argument you would make right now.
No, I think we just want an opportunity to meet. I mean, I'd take a week. I mean, give us a chance. Like, we're asking for an opportunity.
The opportunity to work out.
The distribution, certainly, yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. No, we totally, yeah, no, I think all we need is to have a conversation that we can agree on, and whether we're creating a policy or a resolution or something, but something that we can present, you know, this committee can present multiple positions and see if we can agree upon a distribution.
Right.
And I'm willing to try to do that in a week. I mean.
Well, September 3rd is going to be my second reading.
August 20th.
September 3rd.
We could go as far as September 3rd, right?
September 3rd is when it's listed according to Jeff.
Oh,
Because of the posting requirements, for us to deal with second reading on this.
okay,
That's what we were told.
okay. I've not looked that far ahead, so.
Yeah.
So, gives you a little more time
Yeah.
if you wanna get done before second reading.
Yeah, but I believe we're asking for an opportunity tonight. And if we can't do it, we can't do it, but we're asking for an opportunity.
So you think your group would be comfortable with excluding the capital component for now and deal with the target figure of $100,000 a year out of the tax general fund? Either the general fund or a tax.
Steve, it's $100,000 split between 3 entities and $100,000 grants. Cause only $100,000 is going to what?
125.
120.
Yeah, 75 is going to 3 organizations. This excludes Hiawatha, we have Hiawatha in the town.
It's true.
I mean, we would love the opportunity to improve the capital projects at this point.
That would require what Becca indicated.
Well, no, capital project meaning a bond.
Oh, gotcha,
Two
sorry,
different
not a bond.
things here.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Two different things.
Yes, sorry, I apologize.
Okay? I didn't see that. So it's suggesting there was a note from Jeff saying add it on August 20th instead of September 3rd.
That's what I thought.
That's what we
Yeah.
were, that's the path we were going.
He had initially told us September 3rd, okay? Which is less time. Not, I'd rather have more
I
time,
know.
not less time.
I think it's possible to go to August 3rd, it's just
September
really,
3rd.
or September 3rd, I think it's just really pushing.
It's pushing, but it's even more pushing to get some agreement by
Right.
the 20th.
Right, no, I agree.
That's really, really hard.
Because it's due September 6th, correct?
And it can't be effective until it waits out its referendum period, and I don't know what that is, cause I haven't looked at that yet. So that's probably the reason we want to sooner rather than later.
Doesn't it have to post for some time?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
it has to be posted.
Yeah.
Right, which is why it needed to be posted tonight. But we also have the option of going to a special meeting on the 27th if we needed to give us a little bit more time, correct? Or is there still a time crunch?
The critical thing for me to know is as I post this immediately after your action, to know what date I'm posting that second reading for.
So if we're trying to accomplish what I think's been discussed here, that we talk about the distribution aspects of it, my guess is we'll need more time, not less. So my suggestion is put out the passage on second reading as far as we can to allow us more time to work out the kind of details that we've just talked about.
I have not read your charter for your time period on your posting requirements.
For
For
meeting?
ordinance passage, ordinance passage.
I do it after we pass it, but otherwise it's just
The
24 hours.
notice of the second reading is what I'm
There's some reason it has to be, there's some reason it has to be posted tonight.
Right.
Right.
And I have
But
not looked at that specifically yet.
Right, we need to probably confirm that, because we will need to know when we leave and what that date is.
If it was posted tonight, to make it the 20th, which is
20th.
next week.
Right,
So I'm
so,
wondering if there's any ballot specific rules.
That's what
No.
but presumably if we post tonight, we can go out longer.
Presumably,
Right. You would think so.
you would think so.
Okay. If we can meet the posting by the 20th, we can meet it for the 22nd.
The other piece of that is the effective date of the ordinance, because there's a window of time after your second reading action that citizens have the opportunity to challenge under referendum. And it's not effective until that referendum window passes, and I have not read your charter to know what that window is.
It's different than passage of an ordinance.
This is a passage of an ordinance.
Ordinance is 5 days.
It's
Well, but
5
this
days
ordinance-
after publication.
This ordinance isn't going to affect because it's a Tabor issue. And so
Sure,
it's
sure.
an ordinance only to put it on the ballot,
Right.
not to adopt the language of it, which is normally what an ordinance would do.
I'm gonna pop out and
Okay,
get my
so
laptop.
let's go back to the concept that Bob's talking about, let's go back to the concept of, do we want to put a sunset date in there, a sunset year, number of years? I think that's a pretty critical threshold question. And although I had suggested a shorter, I think a shorter is better, given where we are now, I changed my mind about that, and I guess I would go longer or not have one. But I'm uncomfortable with it, just not having enough information.
The RV last for 25 years would cover any bond issue. Last one, not sure how much the amount was, 20 years, 25 should do well. When you take how much money it is and how much the project might cost, 25 should be very doable. Or we write this in such a way that these organizations get what's left after it's paid.
Which we don't know what that is, but because
It says you get what's
so,
left.
so we could tonight, if we're gonna pass this, we could put in, let's say, 25 years, we could get some more information, we could change that on second reading if needed, just as an option. So, some consensus around 25 years, I've heard 25. Anybody else wanna weigh in on the right number of years to put on?
Kevin, do you agree it's used by law for 25 years and covered?
I'm concerned about that. I was going to also suggest, as another option, is to say instead of 0.3%, we say 0.4%. We've added another project, is there a need for additional funds, and that would be another way to do that, is to increase it slightly.
It means we'll have to work harder, but I think
It's been thrown out there as a suggestion, since you added projects, add some more
we're
money.
willing to work really
And
hard.
one way to do that is to bump it up 1/10% or whatever percent we want, if we wanted to do that.
Even if Hiawatha isn't bonded, it's just put in a separate place for Hiawatha Gardens. It can be used for a match, it can be used as part of a private-public partnership. Right now, there's no money to do anything. This gives something to do something with. And it can be nebulous at this point, but without $500,000 or more, nothing's ever gonna get done, including bulldozing. It takes $1 million to bulldoze it, according to the 10 Old Man's Trevor report. We don't have $1 million to even bulldoze.
It's a good thing our council decided not to do that.
I know, it's just, the point is, to do anything is 7 figures over there. And if we don't add money to even a line item in the budget to say, this is guaranteed for this project, it's just gonna fall down from neglect. Or we're gonna keep putting 200 grand into it every year for one of our givens, and nothing will ever get done. So you need to start a pot of money for that building, no matter what happens to it. Otherwise, nothing will ever happen to it, whether it's adding a 0.1 or taking 50 grand out of this chunk of money, whatever it is, something has to get done, and this is the opportunity to do it.
So, back to the question of Yes.
The 27th will work.
Okay. So back to the question of, is 25 years the consensus at the time for the moment on first reading that we want to include in there? Yes? Susan? No. You have more or less time you wanna put in there? Or neither?
Neither.
Neither, okay.
I was gonna split the difference, but I can go either way, 25's fine.
25.
I'm a neither two.
You're neither too? Okay.
25.
And I can reluctantly live with 25, just for tonight, until we can get some more information. Okay. So, the next question is, about, what do you all think about putting an additional 1/10 in there?
Are we still gonna need 25 years if we do that?
I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. It's more money, probably about another $100,000. And so, it depends on the scope of the project and so forth and so on. It's a good question.
I'm not crazy about it.
Okay. Bob? You were neither, so I don't know if you want to weigh in on that particular aspect, but feel free, of course.
Yeah, I think the public's been conditioned to a $300,000 nut,
Okay.
and I think more than that would start putting help in the market, which is
Okay.
a friendly comment.
Okay.
Becca, is 300,000 about the right amount?
Right, Natalie asked me how much this would generate, and I looked at what we received in sales and use tax for the Downtown Improvement Fund in 2018, that was this last year, and it was 300,000. That is where that number came from.
Okay, so given that it's an estimate in here anyway, it's strictly an estimate at this point.
Right,
That's
it's
a
based upon
reasonable
what
one
happened in
based on recent
2018.
history. Okay.
Right, recent history.
Anybody else want to weigh in on? And the only reason I'm suggesting is because we've added additional costs to it, potentially, or added additional projects. That's the only reason for thinking about it. I think it's easier sell to put it back, but it's less impact if we're adding more stuff.
No, I don't wanna do that.
Okay? Leave it at that, okay? Susan?
I'm still neither because I think that, I've said this before, I would prefer Bob's suggestion that we figure out a way to work through the budget and then work on a bigger project for capital improvements. I mean, this doesn't even, this is just, we don't even know where this is. We're selling this on the library, it's not even in here. I have so many issues with this. It's not that I don't support these organizations, I don't like this decision-making process that we're going through right now. I don't think it's the best one for the community. I think Bob has made some suggestions that we could build on, we could solve some problems in the interim. That's why I'm in either on these two questions tonight.
See, we need for more money. I don't think it'd be a hard sell, it's just a sell. But 0.3 is fine.
Okay. Anybody who didn't weigh in?
I didn't weigh in, I am troubled either way, in terms of, again, I don't like being put in this position, but I will support what we have here with me.
What we have here is the 23.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, like I said, I think if it passes, we're gonna ultimately back into a lot of things, and ultimately, we're gonna be looking for funding sources, and it just may be harder looking for additional funding sources, but this will start giving us matching dollars and potentially bonding and so on.
Okay. So it sounds like there's a consensus, and I would go either. I would go 0.4, because I think the need is there, but, I can live with 0.3 as well. I think it wouldn't get as much done as we hope to get done. It is what it is. Okay, so I think the consensus is to include the 25 years. I think the consensus was to leave the point 3 as written. Were there any other changes to the ordinance that anybody would like to propose tonight?
No, other than that, once we get a little bit more information by the 27th, we may feel differently about the point 3, but at this point.
Okay, so we have in front of us at this point an ordinance, and would entertain a motion concerning ordinance number 1419. An ordinance of or I'll just leave it at that, and someone can incorporate the language into the motion that's made.
I move we approve ordinance number 1419, an ordinance limiting a ballot issue regarding a 0.3% increase in the city's sales and use tax to the electors of the city of Manitou Springs at the November 5th, 2019 general municipal election, and setting the ballot title therefore first reading.
And would you include a change to the ordinance that would increase the term to 25 years from the currently written?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought that had
15
been
years?
done, yes.
I don't believe it has.
And
Yes.
also that the hearing ordinance will be on August 27th instead of August 20th.
And,
That needs to be changed.
yeah,
Okay.
both of
So-
those.
We have,
Okay.
I'm sorry?
So,
So, we have a motion and a second, and let me just be clear, we have a motion and a second to approve the ballot language as drafted, estimated to increase $300,000 annually, by increasing the city's sales tax rate from 3.6 to 3.9%. It describes how the proceeds will be allocated, and it indicates that the tax, I'm not sure where the 15 years is in here now. It's where?
Commencing January 2020, expiring December.
Thank you, there's this period of time, thank you. So we would change expiring 2035 to be 2045, is that correct? Okay, so with those changes, we have a motion, we have,
And change in the second hearing, second reading date.
excuse me, and, changing the hearing date to be, August 27th. So, we have a motion, we have a second, any further discussion?
Yes. Regarding this motion, would the people who moved the motion agree that this is subject to, on second reading, council memorializing what the distribution of this, how the distribution of these funds is gonna be managed?
I don't know that we'll have that by second reading, so I don't think it's necessary. I think I can, once we put it in policy, I think we'll be okay.
So, and I think that could certainly come up on a second motion, if you'd like to do that. I think.
Second reading.
No, well, if you'd like, in other words, if we adopt this, I think you can also bring a motion to suggest that we do the following, as you suggested, we get the distribution plan worked out by a certain date, et cetera.
Yes.
So we can move that action forward, independent of this motion, in the next conversation.
I think that really needs to be worked out, because if we provide this to the public without that component, if I were not sitting in this room, I would be like, wait a minute. How is this money getting distributed? I'd be very concerned about the 66 versus 33, because we got capital and grants all mixed up in the 66%. I think it's gonna be, frankly, if the public focuses on those issues, that'll be very fast and very visible. And we will be chastised for not putting something out that's tight.
So we do have a motion and a second. There was a proposal to change the motion that was not accepted by the movement, but it can be brought up at another point. I would just add to the discussion that I agree with Councilman Todd, and I know we've had this conversation. I would urge you, and I will not be supportive, if there is information that is put out there that is contrary to what the council has decided or what the ballot issue has decided, I think that's a serious problem. you can talk about, it is proposed, we would like, we are suggesting, which is fine. But that's very different from what your website says now.
Did you look today?
I did look today,
It's better, right?
thank you, I'll look today. I
It's,
looked
it's
at-
right, like we have at the very top of every page, it says we are having conversations with city council on a collaborative ballot measure, and all information is subject to change. It's on every single
Okay.
page of our website.
It's a good start.
I'm just saying, but we're trying, we're
It's a
trying.
good start.
Okay, good.
I-
We're trying
I have
everything.
concerns of people signing this petition with the information that was on the website, which may or may not come to pass depending on these conversations. So I just wanted to reiterate that again and appreciate you taking steps.
But we are trying.
Thank you. So, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? Motion passes 5-2.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
part of Natalie's proposal was a small committee
Yes,
work.
let's talk about that now. I have a big start here in terms of the work group, so let's talk about that, and let's also talk about the expectations of that, so that we can meet Councilman Todd's suggestion that we have something laid out by the time of second reading. So, the question is, who would like to volunteer to work your butts off in the next, I'm sorry, you need to prejudice that. Which is what you're gonna need to do, but who's available and who would like to work, with representatives from the match committee
It's gonna be really fun.
to iron this out.
I would like to, but I am not available until Monday.
I'd be willing to start, I know whatever, can you be that person? Follow? I know Matt doesn't wanna do it, and I don't think Sean and he can.
So let's focus on the council for the moment, and then we'll figure out.
I'm sorry, I just realized I had asked.
Yeah, so Jay is available after Monday.
After Monday?
No,
Starting Monday, sorry.
potentially earlier, but probably not early on Sunday.
Do we have access to email if we send them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm in town, I'm just got other projects that have to get done by Sunday.
I'm out of the country until the 25th. Yeah, no.
I'd love to work on it, but I'm not available till mid-September, so.
Do you have access to email?
Although I've had access to it, can be.
Good, Gary. Gary?
All right, Gary.
We can talk every morning at 5.
Okay, we have two representatives from council. I'd like to suggest that
Who's the
Rebecca,
other representative? I got-
Councilman Smith, Councilman Roy.
Okay.
I'd like to suggest that, Ms. Davis, perhaps be our staff representative, as the one person, the most knowledgeable that I know of in terms of financing and so forth and so on.
I volunteer.
Perfect. Wow. And Farley, are you the other from the match?
Yes.
And Natalie, are you the other from the match? Okay. We now have a work group. Now let's talk about what is expected for that work group and by when. Councilman Todd had suggested, and maybe you want to elaborate a little bit more in terms of the expectations that we would have of this work group, by presumably before the 27th.
I think there's two broad stripes. One is, and we can change the ordinance, whether or not that 66-33 split, whether or not the 66% should be mixed in capital with grants and operating capital.
So define that a little bit in terms of the question you're looking to answer.
Yeah, so.
I know what his question is.
So basically I would change the percentages to say that perhaps the capital component on this, based on what we know tonight, for the two projects, be 66% of the tax proceeds, and 33% be the three marquee organizations plus all the other nonprofits. So that question,
So I would say that council.
That's just a ballpark.
Yeah, but council can email us all ideas, like I think at this point, all ideas.
So the question that I'm hearing is consideration of changes to the allocations.
right, so one pot is clearly defined as capital, one pot is clearly defined as grants and operating capital. Those can be used for matching funds. The first component can only be used for paying off the bond. So that would be very clear to the population.
We're not trying to answer the question, we're just
Yeah,
trying
I'm just saying
to
that-
identify
I'm
the
saying
question.
look at that.
Look at the asset allocation. Got it. Other questions that we would like? I'd like to see some discussion about, who's going to make the decisions on this. If it's council, which is what the ballot says, that's great. Let's get out any discussion about some other group making the decision, if that's what we want. So I think I'd like to have come forward. What is the actual? The mechanism, the deciding, who are the deciders? And what's the process to get to that decision?
So who appropriates the money would be a good term.
Who appropriates it and who advises the deciders on the appropriation? If council is the appropriators, then which I'm assuming is a given, then the question is who advises the appropriators or the council in terms of those allocations? So what does the allocation process looks like? Who allocates? Who advises and then allocates? Well, other questions.
The transparency issue, talk more about that. Various organizations.
Transparency meaning what information is going to be available from each or all of these organizations, okay?
Yeah, I'd like to request an annual report, meaning of what this accomplished each year.
Well, I'd probably like a lot more than that. I'm not comfortable giving any money to any organization without knowing what the money's going for, how it's gonna be accounted for, and so.
No, I know, I'm just
so
saying that that's something that's
that-
really important to me.
Yeah, that would be pretty important, I would think, as part of the allocation process. Okay, so that would be spelled out. What else? Anything else? I'm sure there are too. Or whatever else this group would like to bring to us, more information would be better. So, let's look at the calendar and
Obviously, I
figure
would
out.
say what we discussed, the whole bonding issue and more information on
Correct, yeah.
what costs.
Numbers,
or,
all the numbers are.
yeah, the numbers.
So if in fact we're looking at August 27th, the material we would need would be, really, did we just say August 27th?
So by the 21st.
Oh my gosh. The 21st, that's like a week from tomorrow. Why didn't we do September 3rd?
Jeff was surprisingly against it, I'm not sure why.
Close to the six.
You don't have time for that 5-day referendum period,
Okay.
for one thing.
It's fine. So by the 21st, in theory, we should have a packet of information to go into the council packet. Okay? Anything else? Okay. Anything else on that topic? If not, we'll move to item E, executive session. Would entertain a motion to move into an executive session related to deputy city administrator.
I move to go into an executive session pursuant to section 5.1.
Hold on.
Relative to matters that may be subject to negotiation related to deputy city administrator act.
Is there a second? A motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, please raise your hand affirmatively. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody.
I am going to do a little different procedurally and change your actual recording media, so that your executive session is on a separate media. And you don't
okay,
have to-
I was doing a stop, so.
Yeah, do a stop, and I'm gonna get a different flash drive just to,
All right, we're gonna take a
segregate that.
5-minute break.
Yes, yes, I will do that also.
You know, you can't stay here for this. You have to go. I know you're
I
having a
can't
great.
move.
I know.
Holy
Just a
cow.
great time.
Okay, I'm gonna try.
Well,
I'm good.
I will here, but.
Those are the worst chairs.